Okay, right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Scrutiny for Communities meeting here in Taunton. Welcome to the committee and to everybody watching us online. Can I just make sure that everybody can hear us correctly, please? I'm hoping everybody in the room can hear us, but if there's anybody online who is having trouble hearing, can they indicate somehow? We've got a thumbs up, excellent. The agenda pack with the papers is available via ModGov or directly from the council website from the link that was sent out to members, also available to the general public. When I invite someone to speak, could you clearly state who you are for the benefit of anybody who's listening to the meeting so that they can identify you? And can I also warmly welcome any members of the public and media who are joining us today? This meeting is being recorded. And finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I request that members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information? Okay, now we've had a little bit of toing and froing in terms of membership today, so the apologies are going to take a bit of sorting out. I must apologise to Councillor Kendall for assuming he was a substitute rather than a member of the committee, so please accept my apologies for that, Andy. Max, would you like to take us through the runners and riders for today, please?
We've had apologies from Councillor Hazel Prior Sankey, Councillor Kathy Pearce, Councillor Lance Duddridge, Councillor Edric Hobbs, Councillor Simon Coles with Councillor Martin Lovell as substitute and Councillor Susanna Hart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andy?
Sorry, Chair, I've got apologies for Councillor Dawn Denton, who wasn't feeling well this morning.
I got an email from Dawn first thing this morning. Thank you.
So we've got Martin Lovell substitute for Simon Coles.
Sorry, I'm Edric. I'm in the room, so I realised I was able to make it after. Okay, thank you.
Right, so we all clear? Does everybody know they're here? Does everybody know what day it is? Excellent. Right, thank you all very much. The minutes of the previous meeting, they have been circulated. Please note that the minutes for item 9 were confidential. So if members wish to make any amendments to that, they should email the clerk directly rather than open them up in open session. You want me to go through the minutes, or are you happy to take them as read? Okay, can I take that as a proposal? We accept the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. Seconder, Councillor Ham. Okay, thank you very much. That's passed, unanimous. Sign them. Thank you. Right, we have declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from the substitutes and those in relation to today's agenda? No? Oh, sorry. Councillor Reid, please.
Yeah, just take advice, Chair. Item 10, the Opticon Theatre, being Town Councillor for Yeovil, how would that apply?
I think that as a town councillor, I mean, clearly the interest will have been declared as part of the general declaration. I don't see there's any obvious reason why you shouldn't be involved in the debate, but unless somebody, Jenny, are you happy? Yeah, okay, thank you. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Now we have public question time. I have two questions from Jared Colclough and Robin Colclough to talk on the taxi item. Now, do you want to talk now or prior to the item being raised, which is agenda item 9? So, which means you'll be hanging around for a little bit longer. Do you want to say what you want to say now, or? Yeah.
Icon.
How long are we likely to be getting to 9? Have you got any vague ideas?
It might not be much before about 11:15, 12. I don't know. It's,
Yeah, we really do need to hear 9, so we'll stay and if we can speak to.
okay. Yeah, I'm happy for you to speak prior to that item, but it won't be for a little while.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is the work programme. And as you can see, our next meeting is due on the 13th of June. Although I don't know, is the calendar, I think the calendar this year is moving to 6 weekly meetings. So I don't, is 13th of June definitely our next one?
Yeah.
Definitely, okay, thank you. And we have the Gypsy and Traveller Review Update and the Cultural Strategy. Can I ask Chris Hall if the Cultural Strategy is on track to come to that meeting? 13th of June.
Yeah, no, it sits under the cultural directorate. So I'm Elizabeth Dawson, which is the service director, and I believe it should be on track to come.
You'll have noticed that we actually have an item on progress towards this year's arrangements for this year's Glastonbury Festival. I think it would be useful to have a wash-up session of this committee after the festival is finished, and we'll plug that in either to the August meeting or the one after that, depending on which I think is appropriate for everybody. So if we could put that on the future. Councillor Dingwall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a logistical question. Is the meeting date going to change to Thursdays consistently for the rest of the year, just so I can plot out my excuses from work?
It sounds like it. As like the rest of us, you've had a blizzard of emails setting out the calendar for next year. And I think what they're trying to do is to make sure that scrutiny meetings like this do not clash with any other meetings where committee members may be on. So, for example, yesterday I was on a scrutiny chairs meeting, and concern was raised about a planning meeting in Mendip, which was following a scrutiny meeting in Bridgewater that morning. And clearly clashes like that need to be avoided. So I think that's where the calendar is. So it looks to me as if we are moving to a Thursday longer term. Councillor Johnson, please.
Can I just check, are we discussing items that we might like to be on a work programme here, or is that coming later?
We can, if there's something you want to bring forward, please do it now.
Yeah, it's just in relation to conversations we've been having with taxis and wheelchair accessibility to being able to get taxis. I'd quite like to explore wheelchair taxis availability.
Okay, Chris, is that within our purview? Yeah. So that's, I don't know how we phrase that, sort of.
It may come up later on as
Yeah,
more
we'll come up
subject.
with something as a suitable header,
Okay.
and we'll determine whether a report is best for discussion. But yeah, we can certainly programme that in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other items that are burning a hole? I'm sure there will be coming up, but certainly as we move into next year. Right. We are in next year. Are we in next year? No, not quite. Right, we move on next to the item 6, which is Glastonbury Festival update. This is a verbal update from Sarah Dowden. As you know, the festival is an international global event that takes place in Somerset almost every year. The council has a function in terms of licensing. Previously, this was undertaken by Mendip. So this is the first year that Somerset Council, as a standalone council, has been responsible for overseeing issues in relation to the organisation and monitoring regulation of the festival. I think we had a session back in December where members were, shall we say, a little bit surprised to hear that the maximum we could charge in terms of a licence was £32,000, set against the level of effort and input that we had to put to make sure the festival was run and regulated safely. I think Sarah's been doing a fair amount of work that with her team and is going to give us an update on where we are with that. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Will. Morning, everyone. Yeah, so I'm just going to sort of run through. Better. Yeah, I'm just going to run through this morning where we are with Glastonbury Festival for this year. You kind of started off my introduction by saying about the statutory fee that we're all aware of here. So that fee needs to cover all our activities within Glastonbury Festival, and they are set, so there's no movement on that as much as we might like to. You'll know that we have licence conditions, and those licence conditions fall within the 4 main licensing objectives that the festival need to comply with. So that's all in place, and those licence conditions are, if you like, managed through a series of event safety management plans, and there are 21 of those plans. So that's kind of the background and the, if you like, the prep and the admin that goes into it, and those plans are managed and reviewed on an annual basis by teams within and subject matter experts within Somerset Council, and also our agency colleagues, so police, fire and ambulance, and that's a large group of people that get involved in the festival, as you can imagine. So that's the administration side. In terms of staffing, what those event safety management plans do is they look at the areas that we need to make sure we monitor as the responsible authority at the festival. So from those feed things like our staff rotas and how we actually go about checking that they are doing the checks that the festival say they're going to do on site during that period of time, and that is done on a risk assessed basis. What we've spent the time since the last festival doing, bearing in mind that we obviously had some financial constraints that came upon the council in December last year, meant that we've had to really look and make sure that we are putting the resource in the right place where it's needed to be. And that isn't something that can change overnight or year on year with the festival. It has to be a programme of making sure we're getting resources in the right place. So making sure we're checking areas that need to be checked and aren't historically always very good. Let's focus on the areas where we'd like to see some improvement from our point of view as a regulator. So that's what we've done. The other part of the review for this year for staffing has been looking at where our staff are. So there's been a large amount of support staff at the festival on site, an administration team that checks on staff welfare on site during the festival, organises things like the transport on and off site for all the teams that are currently working on site. And that's a historic role, because actually previously, even kind of probably just before COVID, there wasn't the ability to have work remotely, so staff needed to be on site to keep contact with other staff. What we've decided this year is that because of the benefits of using Teams and the other technology we've got now, actually those support teams can work off site, which is far better for them and their welfare, because they're not having to travel into an off site. And actually, when it comes to lone working and being on their own in an unfamiliar and frankly not particularly great environment to work in, actually we can now have them working at Shape Mend It, where they can have all the staff facilities that they need, and they won't have to lone work. So because they finish late at night and start early in the morning, that is better for them. So they're the kind of changes we're talking about. We're not talking about bringing staff off the front line that are actually checking things and checking the licence conditions. It's really about working a bit smarter as we're looking at the whole of the council and all our processes. How can we do this more efficiently? And that forms part of that. The other area that we've looked at this year is some of the monitoring staff or some of the subject matter experts that we might have on site. We have talked to the festival about how we can get them on site should we need them. So a lot of the time we don't need certain specialist members of staff walking around the site in case they happen upon something. What we're saying now is Glastonbury Festival, if there's an issue on site with X, can we get the staff on site to support the authorised officers on site to deal with that problem? And that is acceptable to the festival. So we're kind of working in a slightly different way. Again, trying to think about making sure we're monitoring this the right way, and also thinking about the business as usual that goes on in the rest of the council during the months of May, June and July, when traditionally and historically, certainly for Mendip, it's taken up a lot of time. So there's some of the main kind of changes we're talking about. We will still have that silver officer on site. So that is the role that Glastonbury Festival recognise as the person that they go to if they have any concerns, or if the silver officer has any concerns during the festival, they have their route into the festival that way. So all of that structure remains. It's more looking at each individual post, as we are in our normal day jobs at the moment as service directors, and saying, is this post needed? What value is it bringing? And how can we make it more efficient, for want of a better word? So that's where we are. I am hoping that this year the costs on Somerset Council for monitoring the festival will be reduced with some of these changes we're bringing in. And I am happy that, as we've talked about, we'll come back to scrutiny with some costs after this year's festival. And we've got that full year of calendar costs that we haven't had so far as Somerset Council. So that's what we're hoping to do. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring back an improved picture after the festival. Thank you.
Two hands waving at me. First was Dawn, then Andy, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Obviously, there's lobbying going on about this 15,000 licence fee, which doesn't seem to cover the costs.
32.
Was it 32?
32.
Where did I get 15 from? I'm so sorry. 32,000 licence fee, not perhaps covering the costs of events like this taking place in areas. But I'm just wanting, reminding, what are all the services on site that we are expected to provide? Are they all under that licence, or are there things broader than that licence that we're expected to provide on site? And just clarity on, so services like police, ambulance, what have you, do they have to fund the work they do on site, or do they get funded? You know, do we operate as a council in the way that anyone else supporting the festival operates? Or is there a different expectation that the council will provide all its services without getting any recompense?
Yeah, so we on site, we don't have to provide anything on site. What we have to do is make sure they're complying with the monitoring conditions on site. So that's our role as Somerset Council as the licence holders. So we are making sure if they say they're going to make sure, I'm just going to use some far out examples now. If they say everyone needs to have a blue bag when they walk onto site, we need to make sure that everyone does have a blue bag. If we've said they need to, you know, everyone has to have a pink tent, then we'll check that everyone has a pink tent. And that's our role in it. And we can decide as a monitoring authority whether or not we double check these areas or we double check these areas. So that's all we have to do as Somerset Council. Other agencies, police, for example, have the ability to charge for resources. So if Glastonbury Festival say, I'd like 7 extra police officers for this, or as it probably goes, 30 extra police officers for this event, they are able to charge for that service. That is not something that we're able to do as the licence holders. So yes, for different organisations, they have a different way of being able to charge, but we are stuck, or we have to work within the licence conditions.
Can I just come back? And so under the public health banner, which obviously I appreciate is not necessarily quite the same, how does that operate? Or do you know how that operates under the public health banner?
Yeah, I don't know the detail of the public health, but I understand that they work alongside the UK Health Security Agency, so that they don't charge either for their time, but they have support from another agency and they can work together on those objectives.
What I'm hearing then is a festival is fantastic, obviously, for tourism and what it brings to the county, but there's an awful lot of charges that the council perhaps provides that they have no recompense for.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, in the same way that any licensable activity or event would be the same. So that's why we have to make sure that we are monitoring it in the most efficient and effective way, and in fact in line with other festivals and events that go on within Somerset.
Thanks. Andy Dingwall, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the first is a bit of a random question. We're set to £32,000 as the maximum we are able to charge. Is there any scope in the way that we might volunteer to pay more council tax as residents? Is there a way that we could ask them to volunteer some more money to fund the support services? The second question is, are there any test runs for the efficiency changes? It feels to me like the Glastonbury being probably the biggest event we see in the country, there's a risk if these efficiencies don't work. I suppose, what is that risk?
Thank you. I don't know how it works through council tax, but I'm going to probably say no, because it's a license fee, so we're stuck within that statutory framework for that. If next year they suddenly said actually you can charge £42,000, we would be charging £42,000. I guess that's the reassurance I can give there. Regarding the efficiency savings, I think I used the word efficiency and I probably shouldn't have, but yes, we can adapt on site. That's the role of that silver officer. So we adapt. We have 2 or 3 times a day, there's formal feedback meetings with the staff on site as well as the festival. And actually what we can say to that is we can look and think, actually, we need to focus resource in this area or this area. the monitoring that goes on allows us to review and be flexible in our monitoring sites, and that's one of the changes is we have this monitoring officer role now, whereas previously they might have had a team specifically focused on different areas of the site. Now I've got flexible, I'm using those officers flexibly because they have that knowledge.
Sorry, so I guess the question is, if we get to Friday of the festival and it hasn't worked, is there the scope to roll back to the last year's setup?
Yeah, in terms of getting our administration team on site, that probably is not something that I would be able to do, but I would be able to make changes. And when I'm talking about savings, they are, in terms of staff numbers, it's minimal, and we have a lot of staff on site. You know, we have over 80 staff on site, so actually there's a lot of capacity there.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary Woods, please.
Yes, is there any compensation that we're getting for highways work? Because it creates absolute chaos in the whole of the area. I know this from my past experience.
Yeah, so highways, that's probably a question to take away today, because actually highways wouldn't fall under my remit for the event license. I think highways work separately, well, they do work separately with the festival in terms of any payment for their time and resource they give on site. But I don't think as a wider council we get anything additional in terms of the extra traffic on the road, if you like. But can we take that question away? Is that okay? And get the right person to answer it? Thanks.
I think one of the complications for me is the fact that this committee and communities looks after the licensing function, and climate and place looks after the highways function. So I think the last climate and place scrutiny had a piece on Glastonbury, because clearly, you know, managing the roads appropriately is a huge part of this. I've had concerns raised with me about the overarching nature of the council's involvement within the festival itself, and I've spoken to sort of both branches of the council in terms of licensing and in terms of highways, and I'm assured that each side does talk to each other, but because their functions are, shall we say, statutorily separate, they tend to operate in their own little ways. Now, one of the things I want to do, I said at the outset that I'd like to have a wash-up session. I think we need the wash-up session to be complete. Probably does need to cover all aspects of the council's involvement in this festival. Now, how we do that, we'll need to talk to the senior officers, and whether we do it jointly with Climate and Place or we do it as a standalone, I don't know. But I think it's quite important, particularly, as I say, this is the first year this council has taken responsibility on its own for this festival. As Sarah has just outlined, we're looking at doing things slightly differently here. And so I think it's wholly appropriate that we see how it goes, and hopefully get Glastonbury Festival along as well, so we can get their perspective on how it works, and we can go forward and make sure that it works as well as it can for us, the community, and for the festival. Does that help? Okay. Right, I've got Simon Carswell online, please. Simon?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, just a couple of things. You may be aware that I chair licensing, and I've also had dealings with the festival before as deputy chair in Mendip. As officers and everybody's alluded to, it is by statute that we can only charge on a cost recovery basis. So if Glastonbury Festival, which I doubt they would, gave, say, an additional £10,000, I don't think that could be part of the licensing fee, because that would be over and above what it in theory costs us to charge. So we ought to review, which I think we're going to, how much it does actually cost us to, how much the license actually costs us, so that's the amount we should charge, which at the moment it seems is 32,000. I think it's doubtful Glastonbury Festival will pay any more, because I think historically they've been very poor in paying their fee anyway. I think they're very slow payers. As to regards the chaos on the roads, that has been a lot better in the last few years. Obviously, I drive around this area quite a bit, and once everybody's in, I don't notice any difference on the roads around Pilton. obviously when people are going in, if you pick the wrong time, it can be bad. But if you go against the traffic, it's usually okay. And the same with coming out. And just to be fair to Glastonbury Festival, as a team, they are quite cooperative and do talk to us, but they are poor with fee payment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, I've had chats with Highways, and they seem to be reasonably happy about how it goes most of the time. So, Martin Lovell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Another question for Sarah. Presuming as the part of the licensing involves working with all the other agencies, i.e. That we've already talked about, surrounding health, environmental and police and so on. What if we are limited to monitoring licensing? What is the scope that we have for an overall view of coordinating the work of all these other agencies? Because, and if we're not doing it, who is doing it? Because obviously that must be an important part of the smooth running of the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so we, in terms of the organising, we have a multi-agency meeting which takes place monthly, and that involves all the agencies that are involved with Glastonbury Festival. I chair that, so that will continue to happen. However we all end up looking on site, and I guess that slight reassurance is, in fact, all the agencies are looking at how they monitor the festival at Glastonbury at the moment, and we're all making sure that we do it the best way in the most collaborative approach. The reason it works so well and the assurances that we get are because of that multi-agency working. So that kind of sits, that's the first thing we need to make sure we get right, and that will not be touched and will continue as it is. Where we're looking at is to say, actually, if I've got a health person going out and looking at this, and I've got an environmental health person going out and looking at this, can we in some way work together and not just look at my list and you look at your list, but we've got multi-skilled, clever people officers going out, and they can probably look at both aspects, so we're not having to send two people out to one job effectively, the same way as we would in the normal, back in the real world.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Wes, beg.
Thank you, Chair. So I think you mentioned the number of 80 officers being present at the festival. I take it that's on sort of rotation, sort of shift pattern, maybe. How did you come by that figure? And are you comfortable in that's an adequate number? I know, obviously, in comparison to obviously 200,000 people, it sounds small, but I was surprised you said that amount. I thought you was going to say 40, for example.
Yeah, so I didn't pick the number out of thin air, that's for sure. I guess I've been gifted and the number that we've had traditionally on site at the festival, because that came from Mendip and how Mendip have done it. And I'm new to it, so I'm sort of trying to understand from other officers from Mendip and how it worked and why they've ended up where they've ended up. But what that is it's you end up with the number you end up because of the rotas and the rest periods that are needed. So some of the staff work till kind of 3 a.m. So that means they then have to have a period of time off. It's also, although it might appear it to most people, not the most glamorous of jobs. And, to get staff to work is difficult. So you have to be able to make sure that they're not working every single day for 12 hours on, 12 hours off. So that's why you end up at those kinds of figures. And 80 is just a rough number that I'm currently working with, looking at the figures that I've got. It might not be the end figure. The end figure will be what we need to make sure we can monitor it safely, and we know we're confident with the monitoring we've got going on at the festival. Also within that figure, we use graduates and volunteers, so staff that are or people that are working as students in environmental health or other communities in other local authorities. So some of those that's not a reflection of staff, that's just a reflection of the numbers that we have working through our rotas for that period of time. So yeah, I think I'm always comfortable to sit there and chat through the rotas and understand where we go with it, but I feel that that's why the numbers, we can make some efficiencies because actually of the way the rotas have been done in the past as much as anything.
Thanks. I mean, it was always when we had our meeting in December, I think this was a concern, not least the amount of time, officer time, that goes into simply the planning and putting all the organisation of this, but it's also the drag during sort of middle to late summer of people taking time off in lieu and leave. I don't know whether we pay overtime. I presume we don't. We do?
Some staff are paid overtime at the moment because we're in the position of super terms and conditions for staff, that some staff will get paid overtime in.
So, I mean, in terms of the impact, not directly financially, but certainly in terms of work resource, this is significant. And I think we do need to be on top of it. Now, I think our initial concern was, you know, just the amount of effort that went directly into the festival on the day, as opposed to a £32,000 fee which is the maximum we can raise. And I'm still not convinced that we're getting a particularly good deal out of this, but our hands are very much tied. We have the job to do. We have to have people on site, and we're limited to what we can charge. And we're in a financial emergency. So you put that together, it doesn't paint a very good picture as far as I'm concerned. So I think, you know, separately, we need to be, you know, lobbying government for these major events, because this isn't a couple of thousand people in a field. This is 200,000 people over very nearly a week, plus run in and run off times. Anyway, that's my rant over. Yeah, Councillor Lashon, I've got Councillor Kendall, but I've got Edric Hobbs first. Edric.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Previously, as amended accounts, we've had a site visit to look at the control office and around the site on the Wednesday before the festival. Could I suggest, please, that members of this committee and any other interested councillors would have the same access to go and look around and see what our officers and staff do on site? And I think we'd have and then we get a very good idea of how it works and how much work it goes into running a festival from a council's perspective, please.
Yeah, I can certainly request it of the festival. There'll be some site tours happening this year. Wednesday's traditionally not a great day because we've got a lot going on site, but the event control room is certainly set up while running from the Monday before, so it's probably better to have that tour on the Monday or the Tuesday. But I can certainly look and speak to the festival. Again, not my festival. I can't invite everyone on that, you know, but I can have a conversation with them about if that's something that can be worked through.
Yes, I think that would be very helpful, and probably needs to include climate and place scrutiny as well, certainly from the roads point of view. Okay, I've got Andy Kendall, please.
Yes, I've just picked up on two things. You mentioned the word financial emergency, and Councillor Carswell, I believe, mentioned poor paying. This festival's been going on for years. Can someone elaborate on what this poor paying is about? Is there a date where they have to pay by, and do they pay it by that date, or they don't? Or just an officer, just to elaborate a little bit on it.
I don't know. I mean, that's the first time I'd heard that they were a bit slow in getting their hands out of their pockets, I have to say, which is a bit surprising given the nature of the business.
Yeah, not something I was aware of. If I'm it's not something that someone said to me or that they've not paid. So yeah, no, I don't think I can confirm that or deny it. In fact,
I don't know what our normal payment terms are. I guess would be 30 days, something like. Oh, John.
Yeah, Chair, may everyone hear me? Yeah. So as with any license, there is an annual fee that is due on the anniversary each year of it having been granted. The fees obviously vary. So as you know, as we've talked a lot about, with the larger events, there's an added fee on top of a sort of a standard one, if you like. And the arrangements are that the license is suspended so many days. I forget exactly. I want to say 21 days if that fee isn't paid. So it's as simple as that, and it's the same arrangement all round. So that would be, if it were true that the fee weren't paid on time, then that would be the outcome. And obviously, if it was then paid, it would be unsuspended.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Liz Lashon online. Probably wants to talk about money. So if I can come back to you in a moment, Andy. Yeah. Hello, Liz.
Okay,
was it money you wanted to talk about?
Well, I just want to say, having been county councillor for Glastonbury for 5 years, I want to put in a word for highways, because over the last few years, there has been considerably less disruption. And I think they've been doing a brilliant job. Just wanted the opportunity to say that. And also to say that there is a report that's been published recently saying that the event generated roughly 168 million in income for UK businesses, including 32 million for businesses in Somerset. And I know when we were Mendip, that the figure was for Somerset then was about 14 million. So that's quite a few years ago. So 32 million, considering the higher ticket price and all the TENS, temporary event notices for the smaller sites around the main site. It is a massive business. And I don't think we should underestimate the money that it brings to Somerset. So as you haven't got Councillor Ros White for economic development today, please allow me to make that point. Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, I don't think anybody underestimates that this is a global event. I mean, I think it's in our patch, and we need to make sure that it doesn't sort of not so much overwhelm us, but doesn't sort of knock us slightly out of kilter financially or otherwise. And there's always a risk it will do. Okay, Andy Dingwall, please.
Yeah, it was a question you mentioned. It's the first time you've kind of taken this role on, which is brilliant. I was wondering whether or not we'd had any opportunity to learn from other global events around the country. So the ones that stick in my mind from my youth are things like Reading and Donington, you know, up in Nottingham. I wonder, are they caught by the same things? Have they learned any tricks to help with that?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So over the last year, I've spent so when I say I'm new to, I am definitely new to it, and this year I have been involved previously, and obviously took the learning from colleagues last year as an opportunity, as a learning thing. What I've done in the last year is speak to the local authorities related to some of the major festivals in the UK, including Reading and Leeds, to understand how they go about managing and monitoring the festival, and that's where a lot of my thought process has gone. I've not just sat in a dark room and come up with some random ideas. So yeah, so it's been really helpful to try and look at something that's abnormal for us as a council and try and normalise it across what happens in the UK.
Thank you. Dawn Johnson, please. And there was a Simon C. I wasn't sure whether it's Simon Coles or Simon Carswell who had their hand up, which now seems to have disappeared, but I'll check that in a moment.
Yeah, I'm just checking, you know, is there any plans for counties that host these festivals to do more lobbying of government to revisit the licence fee that we can get for the big festivals? Because it does seem that I think the license, from memory, the licence fees were set back in pre-2000, and so perhaps a bit out of date with the scale of these festivals and the cost to councils.
I think there's always a thought from the local authorities with the larger festivals that it would be great if the fees were reviewed. From my experience as a regulatory officer, you know, the statutory fees will get reviewed at the point that they get reviewed. We don't tend to get involved in the lobbying of government to try and increase the fees. So we're just busy trying to get everything right for next year's festival and deal with the kind of the hand we're dealt, if you like. So we wouldn't do that. At the annual conferences, it will get talked about there on an officer to officer level. But in terms of, yeah, lobbying government, that is not something that we would get involved in.
Okay, thank you. Now, there was a Simon C online, whether that was Simon Carswell or Simon Coles, I don't know. Is your hand come down? Simon Carswell, yes.
As you asked me, Will, it was just to say, I get what the officers are saying about procedure with fees and what would happen if they don't pay the fee on time. But you could say the same with developers who don't do as they say they're going to do on time, and legal proceedings carry on for years. The festival have a lot of clout, obviously, and they hold more than one event. It's not just a festival. There's the Glastonbury Extravaganza at the Abbey. There's the Pilton Party. There's various events. And certainly when I was at Mendip, I was aware that they are not the best payers, whether or not they go over the time, whether they pay within 60 days rather than 30 or 6 months rather than 30 days. But it's already having a procedure in place. But I wouldn't have thought if they paid of the slow players, we're going to suddenly cancel the festival. But they have been slow in the past at paying their fees.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's something we'll make a note of, and for our finance colleagues. Okay. Yeah, Dawn, yes.
I just want to check something after what Simon said. Do we get a license fee for each of those events he's mentioned that go alongside the festival?
Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly. I would guess yes, because the license is related to the premises. So those events certainly two of them take place in distinct different places. You've got the extravaganza at the Abbey. I'm a Glastonbury boy, so I know the area very well. And obviously you've got the festival itself in Pilton. So they've got, certainly those two have got separate licenses, and there would be separate fees for those. I don't know off the top of my head because I haven't historically been involved in the Glastonbury and Mendip side of things. I don't know whether Pilton Party has a separate license. It may do, and if it did, then there would be a separate fee attached to that as well.
I understand that the off-site events, not those two particularly, are dealt with under sort of more informal events licenses, which don't raise a huge amount of money, but some of them are quite local to the festival and some of them bus people in. So there's quite a lot of a sort of satellite ecosystem around the whole thing, which is, well, it must affect the whole area. Okay, well, thank you all very much. That's a very useful, and thank you, Sarah, for a very detailed account of where we're going this year. We will revisit this, of course. Unless there's anybody else who has any burning questions, we'll move on and revisit this back later in the year. Okay, the next item on the agenda is Sarah again. Hope you got a glass of water there. The devolution of services verbal update. Now, this is about, the council have been working quite hard with Bridgewater about the devolution of services. This came forward as a decision, was a non-executive decision fairly recently. It occurred to me as chair of this committee that what was going on in Bridgewater would offer a template for devolution elsewhere. So I thought it would be quite handy for the committee to get an insight into the work that's going on. And with a bit of luck, it can be replicated in other communities as we go forward. Sarah?
Thank you. Yep, so I'll just take a few minutes of time just going through Bridgewater and hopefully some of the learning. Don't be frightened by the slides, there's not many of them. Okay, so the background to Bridgewater Town Council is that they were initially thought to be, or they were a pilot council to have services devolved to them following the new unitary council. So they were always, if you like, or they would definitely see themselves as top of that list in terms of devolution. And the transfer is a result of the devolution proposals that were agreed by Somerset Council on the 15th of January 2024. And Bridgewater Town Council, more importantly, agreed to take on a certain amount of services. This also means that as part of this transfer of services and assets, that there are 2P implications for some staff. So what is being transferred? The street cleansing service, street sweeping, grounds maintenance, open spaces, play areas and fly tipping. In a nutshell, it is all of the operational services that we have in Bridgewater Town Council's area. So it is large, and it probably will be, other than asset transfers that are going on and devolution in Yeovil, it will be the largest fully devolved town. We will withdraw our operational services, or we are withdrawing our operational services in Bridgewater as a result of this devolution. As Will just mentioned then, the key documents and the process, which is going to turn into blueprints going forward. So we are, and I think you're probably all aware because we talked about this, we are the operational side of the council in terms of devolution. The overall umbrella for devolution is picked up within a different directorate. So they pick up the process and what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. What I'm focusing on is what can be devolved, discussions with those town councils and trying to understand the logistics of it, and also understand that I have the confidence that they are going to be able to deliver these services the way we would want them to be delivered. So as part of Bridgewater, we had a financial and HR business case, which was agreed and signed off with our finance experts and obviously our HR team. We did a budget review and worked out how we were going to be reducing our costs. That was done also in conjunction with the town council to make sure they understood what we currently budgeted for. They can obviously set their budgets as they wish, but it was just in terms of trying to help them through that process. Those discussions with Bridgewater Town Council in this particular instance were key. There were a lot of discussions. They had a lot of questions. We talked to them at length about staffing, schedules, rounds that we do currently, issues we come across, how to dispose of waste, all of those discussions which have been documented and recorded, and we will make sure that are fed into discussions with other town councils going forward. A piece of work was done around determining 2P, so which staff are wholly or mostly working in that Bridgewater Town Centre area. Again, that was through a structure of conversations with the operational managers on site, staff involved in that area as well, because they all have a view and they knew that this was happening, and my HR colleagues that have been assigned to help me out with this process. Once we had the staff that we knew are likely to fall under the 2P regulations, that we have a HR timeline that's put in place for the consultation, just to make sure that staff knew the process we were working through. And again, that HR timeline is now a document that can be used with the dates adjusting for future devolution processes. We've created a consultation and presentation document to staff and the unions, which is used and again can be adapted going forward. So that was just a piece of work to make sure that we talk to staff about all the relevant things that they needed to cover in terms of their own well-being. And then also, which we'll mention, there's a key decision. So it was a lead member key decision that was made. That document again was written with myself and assets and will form a blueprint for other key decisions going forward. So all of these documents, including the service level agreement, which is between us and Bridgewater Town Council in terms of what they're going to deliver going forward. They are all documents which have been created and which can be used going forward. So those documents have been passed over to the devolution team, the umbrella team dealing with devolution for the whole council, so that they can be used as templates and replicated again and again and again, which will again, back to that whole time saving piece, will help officers and town and parish and city councils going forward when we get to talk about devolution with them. So in terms of Bridgewater, just for a bit more information really, is who transfers. So because there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Bridgewater Town Centre area, there are 10 posts which will be transferring under 2P. 6 of them are vacant and 4 of them are filled, although I have had a message while we've been in this meeting to say one person has resigned. So actually it's 7 vacant, 3 filled going across to the town council. And the proposed transfer date for the transfer of those services to the town council is the 1st of May this year. That was it.
Chris.
Thank you. Just wanted to add a couple of bits just for clarity for the committee that this devolution is happening by request of Bridgewater Town Council, not by force. So there could easily be a misunderstanding that suggests we are trying to force services onto towns and parishes at their cost. In most instances, towns and parishes are coming forward to us saying, we're really interested in taking on this service or this asset and the associated service. So just want to be really clear that that was the mechanism under which we're operating. Sarah mentioned all operational services. Just want to be really clear that that's the operational services that we hold within communities. It's not highways, it's not adults, it's not children's. There's a variety of services that this council will continue to deliver to the communities of Bridgewater, but this is predominantly the operational services that sit within ops and regs under Sarah and communities more broadly. I also just want to make the point that Bridgewater Town Council have been quite outspoken in terms of the support that they've received, positively outspoken in terms of the support that they've received from Somerset Council and specifically Sarah in getting this devolution to this point. There wasn't an organisational wide framework. We have had to deliver this in some instances against the backdrop of making service reductions versus potential devolution, and obviously devolving services means that the public continue to receive them only from a different public sector organisation. So I think it's really helped the community. It's built a strong relationship with Bridgewater, and I know if the clerk was here today, he would talk very positively about that engagement, and he did to Duncan and I last week. So I just wanted to raise those points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dawn.
Thank you. That sounds like a really good result, and well done for all the work on that. I just have a few questions in terms of sort of detail on it. So where you have existing contracts, are they continuing with those contracts or are they looking to change arrangements? Were those all, how did it work if contracts didn't have an end date at the 1st of May? How did that get resolved? How were services being transferred if there was an existing contract in place that ran over that period? Bridgewater presumably then put their precept up to fund these extra responsibilities? Do you know what that meant for the community in Bridgewater? How they've done that financially? So yeah, I think that's it for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of contracts, it was again more straightforward because the depot at Bridgewater is all an in-house service, so we have no contracts with services, for example, like ID Verdi and other parts of the district. So the staff that work in the Bridgewater Town Council area are our staff. So there's been no need to stop contracts. Is that what you meant by contracts?
So yeah, I was thinking in terms of, you know, ID Verdi contracts that the council had, but which I understand are all, you know, the old historic district contracts. So you're saying basically that that contract has just literally transferred to Bridgewater Town Council?
Yeah, so in the Bridgewater depot or the former Sedgemoor District Council area, all the depot services, all the grounds and cleansing services are all done in-house. So it's all done by Sedgemoor, now Somerset Council staff. Yeah, there's no contract with ID Verdi.
So presumably that made it much more straightforward for them than it would for many others?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the process has been, we can do it at the pace that we and Bridgewater Town Council want to do it at, rather than having to work through a contract expiry date or end date or a transfer of a contract. Yeah, it's made it more straightforward. In terms of the preset, I don't know if Chris has got anything to come in with there, but they have increased their preset, but I'm not aware by how much.
No, sorry, I don't know. I can quickly Google it, but otherwise, no, I don't know.
Thank you. Martin Lovell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions. I notice open air street markets is not on your list. Is that because there aren't any? And if there were, would they be included as part of that devolution process? Secondly, certainly to the outside world, Bridgewater means Carnival as a flagship event. Will there be things to do with the Carnival that are devolved and the statutory things that we did or have been doing? And if not, is there likely to be some confusion that needs to be worked through with respect to the Carnival? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there are no markets that fall under this for Bridgewater, so they run a market in Bridgewater, so that's all in hand already. Good question around the Carnival. So yes, the work that we would do around the Carnival traditionally is the post-midnight cleanup is how it's kind of how we would have done it. So going through the streets and doing that cleanup. That will fall to them to do. How they choose to do it is entirely up to them, and whether they have staff working from midnight till 3 AM or whether they have staff that come on shift at 7 o'clock in the morning, that will be down to them. But yes, that will fall to them to pick up.
Okay, Andy Dingwall, please, and then Andy Kendall.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was a question around the kind of logistics of how things like the street sweeping and stuff, that side of the operational services would run. Two parts. The first is it likely that the sum total of the multiple contracts that we'll see for Bridgewater, Yeovil, Taunton, for example, as devolved councils, and then the rest of the county will come to the same value as the same kind of pound value as the single contract that we might have envisaged for a unitary previously? And then the second part is, are we going to be in a position where the physical kind of the trucks that go along and clean it up are going to drive to the Bridgewater sign and turn around and come back and kind of mop up everywhere there's not a town, and then the town will have their own little fleet of trucks? And is that the most efficient way to spend taxpayers' money, essentially?
Okay, I'll start with the contract value. I think the first part of your question is around what are we going to do with what we've got left, I'm guessing. So yeah, that's something that we're having to work on the hoof, if you like, to try and understand, because as Chris said earlier, we're not forcing this devolution on anyone. So it's a voluntary process, isn't it? So we have to then deal with what we're left with. And at the moment, we've got some other devolution programmes, if you like, on the horizon or very much on their way, that we'll then have to mop up what's left afterwards. So no, I don't know what it's going to look like at the end of it, but we have to work. That's part of my job, is to try and work that through. So yeah, we will keep reviewing and reflecting on that. The second thing you talked about in terms of, are we going to have trucks that turn around at the sign? In Bridgewater, we will, because Bridgewater are picking everything up within Bridgewater, every piece of highways grass, every small patch of land, every large open space. What we will continue to do is the services that they choose to buy in from us, and that's not that I try to avoid it, and it's a trick question, but trees really is the obvious one there. They don't have a team of tree surgeons, and we do, and they will continue, as they have done historically, to pay us for those services. Everything else will in effect turn around at the boundary. Also in Bridgewater, there is some homes in Sedgemoor property and grass that we will continue to maintain. They won't pick that up. I don't know what will happen in other devolution towns, because some may say, we just want open spaces, we just want this one park, we just want this one play area. So it is going to be a different picture. But yeah, certainly in Bridgewater, they will have their own fleet of vehicles that they will work through. And I'm not going to comment on whether it's an efficient use of taxpayers' money or not, but that's that's the programme we're working through. That's my thought process on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtesy of Councillor Lee Redmond, who's online. Apparently the Bridgewater Town Council for a D band has gone up by £3.52 a week, which is the equivalent of £183 per year, but we don't know the percentage. So there has been an increase in order to take these services on. Right, I've got Andy Kendall, please, and then Liz Leishon online.
Thank you, Chair. You can put the first slide up again, could you? Until that, I might need educating. This has not been explained to me properly. It sounds like you're sending people to Bridgewater. The Somerset Council given Bridgewater officers to run the services, or am I wrong?
Well, I was going to just, in my closing remarks, I was going to clarify just how this works.
Okay, thank you. The first slide, or the second slide, sorry, that one, that's the one. It says staff associated with these services are transferring to Somerset Council. So this is where I'm getting a bit confused. Are they employing Somerset?
Sorry,
so
yeah,
are Bridgewater employing Somerset Council and 2P and people to Somerset Council, which I understand, but then the conversation goes on and everyone's talking about devolution to Bridgewater. So I'm a little bit confused. So if someone could just elaborate on the process very simply for me, please.
Yeah, that's a typo. My understanding is there are staff at the moment and we're transferring them. They will be employed by Bridgewater Town Council subsequently, but their terms and conditions will be protected under the 2B legislation.
Right, okay, round wrong way. That's where I'm confused. I do apologise, but I just need that to be
quite understandable. Sarah, did you want to add to that?
Well, I think you've articulated it perfectly. So yes, so 2B is the transfer of undertakings and protection of employment regulations. So where, in simple terms, where the work goes, the people go. So if the primary purpose of their employment is to deliver that work, if we move the work, which we are under service devolution, then the people are protected and they move with it. And they are protected in the sense of their current terms and conditions and contractual arrangements. So there's no detriment to the employees. They transfer across. They will just have a change of employer. It's beneficial for this council because it means the work has gone and therefore the associated costs of employment travel with it. And it's beneficial for the new operator, in this case, Bridgewater Town Council, because there's a level of consistency in terms of who's doing what. So they're handed the staff on day one also.
And presumably the costs of staff include pensions. This responsibility passes to Bridgewater for the employer's contributions.
Yes, they become the employer and all the associated on costs of employment. So employers' national insurance, pension, training, sickness, uniforms, everything in terms of employment transfers.
Thank you. That helped to clear it up a bit.
Definitely. No, I understand it's the other way around.
Just a typo, I'm afraid. Liz Leishon online, please.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the council tax setting that we all took part in at full council on the 20th of February, Appendix 16C gives every single parish precept, and it helpfully gives the council tax change in pound notes and also in percentage increase from 23-24. If it would help, I could send to Jenny the link for her to send around to all the members of your committee.
Thank you, Liz. That would be very helpful. I think we've all seen that town and parishes, some have increased their precepts quite considerably. Some are holding firm. So yes, it would be quite interesting to see that picture. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Right. Now, I just want to be, and I'm going to ask probably a very straightforward question. Oh, sorry, Rosemary, did you want to?
Yeah. Are we allowed to divert from Bridgewater and just talk about parishes that aren't being kept up to date about devolution?
Could we come on to that just in a minute? Let's deal with Bridgewater, and then I wanted to go on to say that this is, I think, as far as I can gather, the blueprint which the council wants to follow in terms of future devolution. But Sarah will be able to talk to, at the part of her closing remarks about where we're going with this and whether it's a sort of push or pull, whether people want us to do it, and to what extent we feel we have to sort of do a little persuading. And I suspect that's very, very little. But just to come back to where we are. This is are these statutory functions?
The cleansing element of it is a statutory function, but
So we are. So in terms of devolving this to Bridgewater Town Council, we have to be absolutely assured that these functions will be carried out appropriate to a good statutory standard.
correct.
And that means that the service level agreement doesn't actually untie us entirely from this particular function.
That's correct, yeah. So with the cleansing or the street sweeping is a statutory function. So just so I think we've talked about it before, but there's no, it's one of those, you could hide behind it being statutory, but in actual fact, what does that mean? What that asks for is that in some way we go and clean our streets. That could be with a dustpan and a brush, or it could be with a big mechanical sweeper. So it's like, it's broad.
Yeah, I appreciate it's a sort of movable feast is a ridiculous analogy, but I mean, I think I know what you mean. But clearly there are standards which, and one must assume that Bridgewater Town Council will set their own standards in terms of this. I think my concern is that if for any reason we in Somerset Council began to get concerned that the standard levels in Bridgewater were dropping, how would that be dealt with?
So we'll have, there'll be quarterly meetings in place with the town council, and we'll address those over that conversation. I'm assuming though, if in the future the standards continue to drop, then we will have to take a decision as Somerset Council, which will be part of another process in terms of how we address that with the town council going forward.
And equally, if Bridgewater Town Council just concluded that this was too expensive, or possibly they're unable to recruit staff. I mean, if there's 7 vacancies out of 10, that's a big ask for the 1st of May. What opportunities are there to hand this back to us?
I don't know if Chris wants to come in here, but I would assume that, yeah, they can hand it back to us over an agreement and a transfer.
Yeah, so where it's a statutory service, that would be our responsibility. They could, in fact, hand it back if they chose to do so. But to be clear, they have set their precept with the anticipation of funding this. And although it sounds quite stark to say there's 7 vacancies, there are many, if not most of those, are filled by agency staff. So agency staff aren't protected under 2P in the same way, but we are naturally giving an introduction to Bridgewater Town Council to say, here are the people currently undertaking this work. They're not a function of 2P, but you can directly employ them or go through an agency to continue that employment. So yeah, 7 sounds stark, but the reality on the ground is it's not as severe as that.
Thank you very much. Dawn, yes?
Just briefly want to check then on this devolution contract. I'm assuming there's a contract involved in some way in this devolving. There's no timescale on that as to how long they are taking that on for, or getting a nod, Ferguson. Is there a contract?
Well, there's a service level agreement which says this is how you plan, because that's the discussions we've had. This is how you plan to carry out those services. They're comfortable with it. We're comfortable with it, but there's no end date of it. It's just we would periodically review it as we go forward. Again, something that we have to work on. The more things we devolve, we have to understand how we're going to monitor it as a council going forward, and that doesn't become an industry in itself, in fact.
Okay, Lee Redmond online, please.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me for coming in. I'm a declaration of interest. I'm a town councillor as well as a unitary councillor. It's just a couple of points, really. First, without putting words in my colleagues on the town council's mouth or the clerk, I'd like to support the comments that Chris made earlier in relation to it was a partnership in this going forward. But just you're right, Chris, to say that we weren't forced to do this. However, the town council saw it as potential with the current financial crisis of the council that some services were at risk. So because we were a pilot previously, we were lucky enough to be ahead of the game on this. And it's more a matter for us of being able to maintain services to the town and continue what we're doing, and also to take a bit of ownership in that. We've also, by the way, taken on a number of areas. So a lot of the parks are now under our control, along with a couple of buildings, which we're hoping to build on and go forward with. The town council went into this with their eyes open. There was a few bumps and potholes along the way, but the process has worked really well, and we're happy with where we are. Would have been nice to have some money come across with some of these services to help us, but there you go. We are where we are, and it's a matter of being honest in that. And it's more a matter of just say, I know if our town clerk was here, he would say that should any councils, parishes or clerks wish to get any information or on what's happened and how we've done it, he would be more than happy, I'm sure, to step up and do that. And I'll apologise to David now for volunteering in for that. But thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Andy Dingwall, and then we'll wind this up.
Really quick one. The SLAs, particularly for the first project, will there be opportunity for councillors, maybe not this committee because we're not meeting again until after the 1st of May, but to review them? I'd really like to see what the action is if service level agreements are missed, and how that would then roll out to other devolution projects.
Yeah, definitely. I can get the documents available once they've been, templatized. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we'll put this on as a sort of review item for later in the year. I think that would be very sensible. Dawn, very briefly.
Sorry, very quickly. Were there things that town council wanted to take on that were not feasible or couldn't be organised? I know town councils have talked about car parks and maintenance of those and taking on those responsibilities. Obviously, they'd get the income from those. Are there areas where it's just not viable, or you have considered it's not possible for it to be transferred over?
Yes, there are areas, and car parks are one of them. I think it falls out of the remit of regs and ops, though, in terms of some of those assets. So that definitely is a question for the devolution programme to answer, because that they set the tone, if you like, for some of those conversations. So here we are focusing on the regs and ops services. What I would say is that the reason I think Bridgewater has happened as I say more easily latterly now, when we've got a bit of momentum going, is because actually they recognise that, and they understand they understand that they're not going to get the car park. Actually, this is the picture, as Lee's just said. They were eyes open with this. So actually, this is what they're taking. They'll take it without the car park or the other thing that might bring them some money in as well, which has helped it work through.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary, did you want to return to your point? I think what you were getting at was what's next? Where are we going from here? Was that right?
It's more about buildings in Willerton, and our parish council doesn't feel they've been included in the negotiations. They've been a bit miffed that they haven't been included. That's the feeling I get from the parish councils. And buildings in Willerton impact on a lot of other smaller parishes. They would have liked to have been included in the discussion, which is coming forward now.
Yeah, this is a separate work stream, I suspect, the devolution of assets, isn't it, rather than devolution of services. I think where I was going to ask Sarah, are there any other towns or large parishes in the pipeline for further work on this type of initiative?
Yes, there are, is the very short answer, and that was part of our kind of questions back to you today, was how would you like those handled going forward?
Well, I think firstly, I think we need to know where they are. I think we'd like to, it's a sort of past, present and future, isn't it? You know, what we're moving from, where we are at the moment and where we're going to end up. So I think on behalf of the committee, I think I'd like to know who has come forward, at what stage the negotiations are and what the relative timetables are. And when the job is done, we need to be in a position to review how it's gone and more importantly, what the learning points are, because you've been through an initial process. You must have picked up, and Leah's just alluded to this from the town council side, that there were some strong learning points. And I think we need to make sure that they're captured. And if Bridgwater Town Council is prepared to be do we call it a sort of partner, or to provide assistance alongside organisations like SALC and local council clerks and things like that, then I think it will obviously help to smooth things out, because they will have hit sort of practical problems either within their capabilities or actually just on the ground. And it's important to be able to pick those up, work out how we've got over those, or whether we've just had to say, well, like car parks, as you've just mentioned, we can't touch that now. We've got to move on with what we can move on. So I think that's this is going to be an ongoing thread for this committee over the next 12, 18 months, I suspect. The devolution of buildings and assets, I don't think falls within our remit, does it, Chris?
Yeah, can I just make a couple of general points? So devolution as a whole is owned by the partnerships and localities side of the organisation, which sits outside of communities. They hold a central register of all of the requests for either asset or service devolution that have come forward from city, town and parish councils. And then they look to allocate resources based upon what is going to give us the biggest financial contributor for this council, because yes, we want to do this because it's what the communities want, but our financial driver is what's going to prioritise which services or assets are taken first. At that point, when we recognise that there's a city, town or parish that has enough mass in terms of their request, and therefore that brings enough financial value to the council, a service director is allocated to be the sponsor for that town or parish. So Sarah was for Bridgwater, Liz is for Yeovil, and so on. So at that point, we engage with them around a package of services or assets that they're interested in, and we try to understand what the red lines are. So I don't think the council has ever said car parks are off the table, but I think the reality is that if it's a fee earning car park, transferring it and the fees that are associated with it diminish Somerset Council's financial position, not benefit from it. So there will be some fee earning assets where we legitimately will say there is no benefit to Somerset Council in transferring those. But there are some packages of arrangements that we are looking at. So Yeovil's is slightly more complicated because it's a package of services and assets. It's also slightly more complex because there's different governance arrangements for the disposal of services as there is for the disposal of assets. So they require different council decisions, and there is a different governance route for those. We've been quite fortunate in that Sarah's area, she's been allocated Bridgwater, and the majority of the services they want are the services that Sarah is also responsible for. But there's one Sarah, and there are many town and parishes, and they want a very similar range of assets and services. So there is a challenge here for the allocation of resources. It's also worth bearing in mind that full council set aside £600,000 to help support the service and asset transfers in terms of providing legal resource and asset management resource. So we are putting money behind this to make it happen, but they are not dowries. They are to help enable the transfer to occur, rather than to say, if you take this service or asset, here's some money to go with it. And again, I come back to the point that the thing driving this is the need for Somerset Council to reduce its revenue costs.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, I do recall the 600,000. I must confess, I had hoped that some of it would be available to help support parishes in this work through training clerks and things like that. But if it's staying in-house, it's staying in-house. Okay, I think that's done now. Unless there are any particular points to raise. So thank you all very much. That's very, very interesting discussion, and we will come back to it in future. Right, we now move on to item 8, which is the Community Services Budget Monitoring, month 10. Kerry and Christian. Kerry is in the room. Christian's online. Who's leading off, Chris?
Yeah, that's me. Hopefully you can hear me.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So Chris Evans, Head of Finance Business Partnering. So this is the month 10 budget monitoring position as at the end of January. Just a quick reminder of the recommendations. So Scrutiny is asked to consider if there are any general comments or observations that they wish to make to the executive on the reports. And the second one is if any actions set out in the report are appropriate and if any further actions should be included in the report. So there isn't a month 11 budget monitoring report, and that's because the finance team are focusing on the closing down of the first set of unitary accounts for 23-24. From an overall corporate perspective, the overall variance is 16.3 million. The majority being adults and children's of £14.9 million each overspend, which is offset mainly through climate and place through 7.3 million favourable variance. It is £1.2 million favourable from the previous month, which is good news, but still obviously a rather large variance there. From a community services perspective, so the overall predicted £700,000 underspend on a net budget of 36.3 million. This is £400,000 better off than it was in month 9. The largest underspend is 900,000 within cultural services. The Octagon Theatre not being operational has led to savings on premises budgets. And also there's been additional ticket sales from performances at Westlands. That's also led to the favourable variance too. From a housing perspective, they're predicting a £300,000 adverse variance. In housing options, there is significant challenges with pressures on bed and breakfast costs and demand. Also reliance on agency staff, which do generally cost more than our own staff. There is also an increase in demand for the service due to flooding and winter pressures generally. There has been additional expenditure on homelessness and rough sleeping of about £1.25 million, but thankfully that's been covered by additional government grants. From Regs and Ops services are currently forecasting within budget, which is good news. Customer services is a budget of nearly 6 million, with a predicted £100,000 underspend throughout various cost centres in there, generally savings on salaries. And just a quick point for 2024-25 budget monitoring. So we will be working together with Chris and the team, obviously, regarding reporting key performance indicators as well as just the financial position as well. So happy between us all to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, the first thing I want to congratulate the Directorate on balancing its budget through the years. A lot of hard work, I think, going into that, particularly with everything that's swirling around across the council as a whole. So I think on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for a job well done. Are there any questions about the budget, bearing in mind that we're past the end? Andy.
Thank you, Chair. One or two. The first in the housing options section, Chris, you mentioned the grant funding has seen in the report here seen essentially doubled the budget in there. I wanted to know, is that grant funding secured for future years, or is that going to be an additional pressure in next year's budget if we've been working to 9.5 million and are going to come down to closer to the 4.9 we've seen there? The second question was more about the increased ticket sales in pantomime performances. What's driven that, do we think? And are there any costs associated with driving those additional ticket sales? So if it was extra marketing, has that been kind of budgeted for and covered in here, or is that likely to pop up in a future report or on someone else's spreadsheet?
I think I'll leave the Westlands. I know the pantomime did go down very well, but I'll leave that probably to Liz to answer that one. From the housing options perspective, yeah. So we do have ring fenced government grants, so we can't be using anything else, and obviously that's helping us pay for that additional costs with the rough sleeping. One thing we will need to be reviewing for 24-25 is obviously what reserves we have, including some of the ring fence grants that we have carried forward. So I haven't got the figure for you, but I can certainly get back to you with how much we do have in that reserve. But it is ring fence, just to assure you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, all right, Andy. Liz Lachon, please.
Thank you, Chair. On pantomime's really interesting for theatres because if it's an in-house production or a joint production, you're not paying someone else the majority of the percentage on the ticket price. So most theatres in this country depend on their pantomime for a considerable amount of their income through the year, and they certainly see all the theatres through kind of January, February and the quiet months as well. So it was really good this year, the pantomime that was at Westlands, although obviously it's limited in its technical ability in a building like Westlands. Councillor Redman will know all about this too, of course, from his work at Bridgewater. But yeah, it's a really important time of year. If you don't do well with your panto, you don't do well the rest of the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Liz Dawson, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add, also, I think the team have worked incredibly hard. So I think there's something called sweat in the asset. And I think the team actually through the financial emergency, amongst like all of the services in the cultural directorate, they've really stepped up, but specifically in the sort of entertainment venue, they've really worked hard. So I think it's probably feedback to them. They've been putting quite a lot of different kind of entertainment packages on as well at Westlands. So they've been thinking about it in a very different way. So there's credit really back to the team.
Okay, are there any other questions? Since we passed the end of the financial year, and as you say, we're not going to get an 11, it'll all be in the main outturn. I think the budget's gone in this particular aspect of the council has gone very well this year. And as I say, to everybody to be commended for that. If there are no more questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kerry. Right. Beg your pardon. Item 9 is taxi fares. And we have two public speakers, Mr. Colclough and Mr. Colclough. Is that right? Mr. Jared Colclough and Mr. Robin Colclough. You happy to speak now?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
You've got the mic. You've got the mic.
We have, yes.
Okay.
Hello.
You have 3 minutes, please, each.
Hello, my name is Robin Colclough. I've been a licensed taxi driver in Taunton Deane for very nearly 30 years. And I've been the owner and operator of Scorpio cars for 28 of those years. I am also the spokesman for the Taunton Taxi Drivers and Owners Trade Association. When the association first saw the proposed tariff change of the original tariff, we were extremely worried about the following points. The change to the timing of time and a half from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock and the loss of Saturday daytime would have a devastating effect on taxi owners, but more importantly, a crippling effect on a driver's ability to earn a living wage. A driver who normally works these hours would see an average loss of nearly £80 a week in takings. Bad enough for the owner, but critical for the driver on commission. This would equate to £2,000 a year in lost earnings for a driver on the national average commission of 50%. Even after taking into account the increase in the basic tariff, the driver would still see a loss and be down over £1,200 a year in earnings. Now, in previous years, that might be the loss of a week away with the kids in the summer. Now, in the current conditions, it could be the gas or the electric bill that doesn't get paid. Drivers on 50% commission very rarely earn minimum wage, and evenings and weekends are the chance to make up their weekly pay. If they lose this opportunity, then I can assure you Taunton will steadily lose drivers who will leave for better paid jobs. This also applies to owners who will struggle to maintain their businesses with lower earnings. When time and a half was reduced from 11:30 back to 10 o'clock, I personally presented some research I did to the licensing committee. The basic premise of this research was the time at which 6 large companies in Taunton paid an enhanced hourly rate. The earliest was Maynard's Bakery, who paid a higher rate to those starting their evening shift at 5 o'clock. The latest was Asda, who paid a higher rate from 9 o'clock. When the time was lowered from 11:30 to 10 o'clock, we, as a trade, made a promise to the committee that we would not ask for it to be any lower in the future. The proposal to move it back to 11 o'clock is a low blow we never expected. It is bad enough that we have to wait until 10 o'clock, but 11 o'clock is quite simply not fair. I can absolutely guarantee that any and all passengers travelling after 10 o'clock will be paid an enhanced hourly rate long before the taxi driver is. A lot of taxis in Taunton cover school run contracts for Somerset Council at a rate lower than metered rate. The ability to earn extra from time and a half to cover the bills associated with the business and to earn a living isn't a desire, but an absolute necessity.
Okay, thank you. That noise was your time. Thank you very much for keeping to time. Jared Colclough, please.
Hello, my name is Jared Colclough and I've been a licensed driver in Taunton Deane for nearly 14 years. I am the owner and operator of Grab a Cab Taunton Limited, a small taxi business running 4 taxis. Our 5th should be, logically, a multi-seater. The extra charge of £2 per passenger over 4 in 6 and 8-seater taxis is nowhere near enough to cover the extra cost of buying and running these vehicles. 6 and 8-seater Hackney vehicles cost between 30% and 40% more to buy and roughly the same in extra insurance premium costs. They are also far less economical in fuel, 25 miles to the gallon versus 40 plus in a 4-seater saloon car. A fare to Wellington from Taunton currently costs £20 at day rate, 30 at time and a half, and a 6-seater carrying 5 passengers after 10 o'clock can currently charge £40 for this journey. If the new tariff is introduced, they would be able to charge £32. The extra £2 would barely cover the extra fuel used and would go no way towards the extra purchasing and running costs. The longer the journey, the more deficit the owner is into. A journey from Taunton to Bridgewater at the 3 current rates would be £30, £45 and £60. But at the proposed tariff, the maximum chargeable with 5 passengers would be £47, with all the aforementioned costs. We realise with the proposed rate change that the new tariff, these prices would go up, but the negative effect would be the same. The taxi driver owners would quickly abandon the larger vehicles as they would no longer be economically viable. The travelling public would be restricted to 4-seaters. The effect of this when travelling home at night is as follows. Taunton to Wellington, 1 6-seater, £40, 2 4-seaters, £60. Taunton to Bridgewater, 1 6-seater, £60, 2 4-seaters, £90. As you can see, the loss of the 6 to 8-seater fleet would have a huge knock-on cost for transport and ultimately a loss of people choosing to travel further than the local pub for their evening's entertainment, or possibility of taking the risk of drink driving to save the cost of 2 taxis, a consequence that horrifies the taxi trade. In conclusion, I would like to say that the trade, by and large, is against the first tariff proposed, but is universally in favour of the second and amended tariff proposal, which is a maintenance of the status quo to include the increase to the base rate, which is so desperately needed by the trade, to go some way towards offsetting the increase in business costs and the ever-rising cost of living. We would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak and look forward to the conclusions of your deliberations.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Right. Just to clarify, Mr. Robin Colclough, you say you're talking on behalf of the Taxi Drivers Association in Taunton. Thank you. Thank you. Right. We have John Rendell here who will take us through the report and then we'll have a chat about it.
Thank you, Chair. It's the council's responsibility to set the maximum that taxis can charge. And there are various prices for distance, waiting time and so forth, which are set out in what is referred to as a table. There are currently 4 existing tables which were adopted by the legacy councils, and they're all different. So currently we don't have a level playing field for drivers or taxi users across Somerset. And it's my goal to introduce one table of maximum charges for Somerset as a whole. Changes to the maximum are naturally never welcomed by taxi users, many of whom are reliant on public transport. But it is important to set the maximum at a level which ensures that drivers can earn a living. Of the 4 tables we currently have, the oldest, if you like, is the one that was adopted by Sedgemoor District Council in 2019. Even just in the last couple of years, motoring tax and insurance costs have risen by over 100%. And in my report, I've mentioned that and given links to the sources. We published a table in January that was, in essence, a blend of the 4 existing tables. Under that proposal, prices would be more or less than they currently are in certain areas, depending where the journeys would be carried out, what times of day and what days of the week, and in some cases for larger groups. And we've done some modelling of prices for certain types of journeys, and those are included as an appendix to the report. The table that was published underwent an 8-week consultation, and there were 75 objections in total, 88% of which were from the taxi trade. A large proportion objected to prices for certain trips going down, and it's fair to say that the Somerset West and Taunton area drivers would be the ones most affected by the original proposal. In my report, I am recommending a table of maximum fares that is different to the one that was published, and that is in recognition of concerns that have been raised and the statistics that I've referred to in the report, which show that there have been some significant cost increases in recent years. Rather than a blend of existing rates, it would represent a general uplift, ensuring that no drivers would experience a pay cut of sorts. I just thought I'd highlight that I have made a error in the report, or there was an error in the report that was published, which I've now corrected in lieu of executive, and that is at paragraph 37. I've made reference to the private hire trade monthly league tables, and my error at that paragraph is it should read between numbers 87 and 99, and I've quoted larger numbers there, so please bear that in mind. And that concludes my presentation, so happy to take any questions.
Sorry, just on that last point. So it should read Somerset Council between 87 and 99 in the rankings. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, not okay. Thank you. Right. Are there any questions from the committee? Andy.
Thank you, Chair. And I actually also want to thank 2 gentlemen for coming in. Not only have you answered some of the questions that I had for officers in your statements, you've also fully changed my mind on one of the challenges I wanted to make. So one of the questions I had was about the impact of the change in fares for taxi drivers, £80 a week, as you mentioned, and the second, dropping the night rates from 11 to 10. You made a very convincing argument there. So my final question that I do still have, though, is what is the potential impact on the council for these increases in fares through things like home to school transport contracts? I understand they are contracts, they're not immediately subject to renewal on accepting these tables, but when those contracts come up for renewal, is it likely that we're going to see increased costs based on our own changes that we're making?
Afraid I don't know the answer, Chair, so I can make a note of that one, because I don't know the ins and outs of the arrangement between our transport colleagues and the trade, although you have got some hands up in the room. I don't know if it's too late for them to be involved in the discussion now.
I'd be, well, yes, please, if you.
Sorry, the metered rate is not what the council pay. So every year when we are awarded a council contract, it's based on a tendered price. 70% of the award is based on the price that we submit. As Robin has said, that price is way below metered rate anyway. However, there is a usual annual increase in line with inflation. So no, at the moment, if it's adopted in May, it won't affect anything until at least September, where we have a standard increase, but it will be negligible.
Thank you.
Okay, that's your points. Dawn.
So I have a number of questions. I'm obviously, as a councillor, I represent my residents who say they struggle with the cost of taxis in our county. And from my personal experience travelling, it does seem that our taxi fares here are higher. And I know you've done the £2 analysis comparing us to other areas of similar type, but it doesn't say how many that's ranked out of across the country, which would be useful context. And when it comes to the taxi earners' livelihoods being affected, I don't feel I've got enough information here, because I don't know what a taxi driver is earning and how much of a living they make. How much of how well they do is down to what proportion they pay the taxi managers, owners. You know, I think I've heard that 50% or something of wages goes somewhere. So I don't feel I've got enough financial context to be deciding for the people of Somerset what is the right taxi fare they should be expected to pay. There's a lot of vulnerable people that are reliant on taxis, and we really do need to look after them as well. And I'm kind of weighing up, who are the people most in need here? Are they the people that are reliant on taxis against what income is being generated? And I don't know what the income figures are. So I'm struggling to sort of balance all that. What I also don't have is things like time and a half on a Sunday. Is that something that happens across the country? Is that unique to Somerset? Some of the things that, so, you know, the price of a basic 2-mile journey is one thing, but it can vary so rapidly. And we live in a very rural area where a 2-mile journey wouldn't get you very far. If we were to look at a 10-mile journey, a 15-mile journey, are those discrepancies different because of the arrangement we have for the extra mileage, blah, blah, blah. You know, I just don't feel that I have enough context to really weigh up what should be the right financial decision here. I also wondered if, you know, I hear your point about the 6 to 8 vehicle holders. I don't know what proportion of journeys are required of those vehicles. I don't know how many of those we have, how many trips are made asking for those vehicles. And so I'm finding it really difficult to weigh the whole picture up financially and work out, are we doing anything different in Somerset that other areas aren't doing? And are we giving good value to our residents at the charges we're making?
Okay, Chair, thank you. Thank you for the question, councillors, all the questions. I'm going to struggle to answer some of those because likewise, I don't have necessarily the sort of data to back those up. Certainly, I have just glanced at the private hire trade monthly league tables, if you like, just to answer that question. And it would appear that there are 344 separate authorities mentioned on that league table, although the bottom 4 don't seem to charge anything. So I guess they don't have a maximum rate that they've set. So 344 there, or 340 that certainly set a maximum limit. I've made a note of the questions. Like I say, I'm afraid I don't necessarily have answers for you today, but I can certainly see what I can do in lieu of taking that to executive.
Dawn, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just briefly. So you're basically saying we are 8 on the 2-mile analysis, which I don't really think represents most of the journeys in Somerset, to be honest. But on that analysis, and it will obviously vary on a rural or city-based authority. So we're looking at rankings, I think you said 87 to 99 out of 344, which seems quite high, but it also obviously depends who's above us. Are those city-based places where the majority of journeys are 2 miles, or are they home counties? Are they rural locations like ours? I just feel I'd like more information on that to give some context to how we actually compare.
Duly noted, Chair. Yeah, I'll look into that.
Mr. Colclough, did you have a point of information?
Just a
rather than
very quick
adding
answer to that. The actual journey length is almost immaterial because it's the taxi price is set on distance. So the price per meter extrapolates over to a 1 mile, 2 mile, 10 mile, 15-mile journey. It makes no difference whether you're traveling that 15 miles from a town to the middle of the countryside or 15 miles across London. The set fare is the set fare per meter distance. So rural, yes, we may have more people living further away from town, but I think actually for some people that's quite a benefit that don't live in a town, they live in the countryside. And if you have a benefit for where you live, you also have a downside.
Thank you very much. Yes, Edrich.
Thank you. I can appreciate the dilemma we are in, and also a mother who's just recently had to give her a driving licence due to dementia, who lives probably 6 miles from the nearest large town or village. My view would be that allowing the guys to have a reasonable rate at evenings or weekends is reasonable to maintain their reasonable standards of living. But don't forget, even if we were to set a rate slightly higher, the people are still free with an operator to negotiate the price. If the guys felt they could do it at a lower rate, that's up to them. But I think, no, I'm sorry, I disagree. My mum's spoken to an operator lately about negotiating the best price for a journey to a care home. It's 10 miles away. And I won't go into it in this room, but she's been able to negotiate a slightly better price with an operator. So I do think, although we perceive taxi fares as being high, as somebody else who runs a small business and uses fuel, not as much as these guys do, I can appreciate the dilemma they're in. And I don't think cutting the times they can charge a higher rate is fair.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think the dilemma it describes it very well. Clearly, under a new council, there is a desire to harmonise everything. But it would appear that in that harmonisation, that the taxi drivers in Taunton Deane are the ones who are going to lose out. Can I ask what's the specific driver for harmonising all the rates across the county, other than the fact we're just one authority now?
I have mentioned in the report, I suppose the benefits in doing that, or the drawbacks of maintaining 4 separate ones. Obviously, if we do maintain 4 separate ones, naturally it is less efficient for us to review, keep those under review separately, and then go through the process of amending them and adopting variations over time. So from if you like, from a selfish perspective as an authority, there's that, but also from the perspective of trying to make it, I suppose, fair and even for drivers across the county and what they can earn, and for what people pay as well, so that where you travel or where you work, you're not being disadvantaged by where you are. Actually, everyone is able to earn up to the maximum, because it is a maximum as well. So I know that in the objections that we had to the published table, there are 1 or 2 from the trade across Somerset suggesting that why not just leave it as it is, and they don't need to go up necessarily. Well, you don't have to put your prices up. We're not forcing you to do that, but we're just trying to make it fair so that those that do can.
But this is imposing as I understand it, a price cut in Taunton Deane rather than. No, all right. Sorry.
So, Chair, no, easy mistake to make. So the first table that was published in January was essentially a blend. So a blend of different aspects of the 4 existing tables. But in the report that I've drafted for this meeting for executive, I have actually made some alterations to that original table, and there is now a modified one that I'm recommending, which, if you like, addresses the concerns raised by the trade in Taunton.
But as we've heard today, there's still outstanding concerns, but thank you for that.
No, sorry, just to clarify, Chair, I think the two gentlemen over there have said in their speech that they actually are in favour of the table that I'm recommending in my report, the revised one anyway.
Okay, thank you, Dawn, sorry.
So I'm looking at Appendix 5, and it seems very much that we've gone with the higher end of fare charges rather than the lower, which would seem to have been in Mendip and South Somerset had lower charges. And what you're recommending is very much at the top end of pricing. So I'm struggling to see why Somerset and West taxi drivers are worse off, because it looks like they are getting more from that table.
Just to look at the table, I think there are a certain number of examples in particular. I think I may have even
If I
mentioned.
compare the Somerset, Western, Taunton with the recommended table, most of the fees go up.
They do indeed. There are. It's down to the nighttime rate and the Saturday. So let me just.
Yeah, I see the odd one that comes down a bit, which are maybe later.
Yeah.
but
So yes, that's right. So I think
balance, would that mean that generally they'd be better off? And actually, they're going up a lot more than people in Mendip and South Somerset are used to paying.
Sorry, say that I didn't quite catch that.
And the recommended means a large increase for people in Mendip and South Somerset.
It does, yeah.
So Taunton has been paying a lot more, or Somerset, Western and Taunton have been paying a lot more than a lot of other areas in Somerset.
Correct, yeah.
Right, Mr. Robin Colclough, I will bring you back in, but only on a point of information, please.
The information that is relevant, that what we are complaining about is not the cost per mile. What we are most horrified about is the loss of time and a half for an extra hour of an evening and all day on Saturday, because that would have a huge effect on everybody's earnings. Not so much affecting the owners because we have the business, but it would directly affect the only ability for the drivers to earn money.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was the point I made in terms of reducing income rather than reducing rates anyway. So, Dawn, did you want to come back?
Sorry, my
Yeah,
school
put the
runs
mic on,
dotted
but,
throughout the day,
yeah.
so I don't actually have the time to work extra hours on the rank, trying to get that extra increase in the daytime to make up for the huge loss at the weekend.
What you have to work out is that our earnings are over a 24-hour period.
No, I do.
There's not, you can earn it during the day, doesn't matter if you lose it at night. We look at our earnings across the whole year, and by losing the time and a half, you would go down, essentially each car would lose about £4,000 a year. That's 2,000 for a driver. Then you factor in across the 24-hour period the increase you're getting, which is only the second increase we've had in 14 years. Then that doesn't add up anywhere near to what you would lose by not having the time and a half.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll draw that to a close there. Edrich, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just quickly to back up my own views, having seen how busy taxi ranks are in relation to, the pay rise during the week won't offset what I've seen at weekends. I'm freaking around Wells bus station, which is a very large taxi rank, and weekends and evenings it's very, very busy because sometimes we park our camper van there, so I see how busy it is. During the day I frequently see drivers sat there, playing on their phones that are not that busy, so I don't think a rise during the week it would offset the loss of earnings at evenings and weekends. So although I've got not the knowledge these guys have, it's their job, I can appreciate that is where the bulk of their earnings can be made, is by having a damn good Saturday night. Thank you.
No, I won't bring you back in now. I think we need to move on. Okay, this is a tricky one. Where are we in the democratic process, please, John?
So the decision needs to be made at the meeting of executive on the 8th of May. There's a 2-month window following the end of the objection period within which the council needs to make the decision, and it's an executive function.
Okay, so this committee needs to formulate some comments based on the recommendation that, and this paper, as you've written it, is going forward to executive next month. So we need to pass a view on it. Dawn.
So I'm still struggling because what these tables don't give me is the impact on taxi firms of this change. I can see the prices are going up across a large parts of the day, including into the evening. I don't know when. I mean, I obviously have your word for the impact on you, but I don't have that information in front of me that tells me what this extra cost will mean to the businesses, and I just feel the information is not really conclusive enough on the impact, and that then sets the price. I just don't feel I have enough information to make an honest assessment of what the price should be.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. The recommendation, which I think would pass forward to executive, is that having considered the objections against the proposal, the executive resolves to adopt the recommended tables shown in Appendix 1. I think from the scrutiny perspective, we ignore that, but we come up with some comments in relation to the report and the debate that we've just had. Rosemary, are you waving at me, or are you just paying attention? Okay, so I will try and summarize the debate as best I can. And as I've perhaps already betrayed, this is not an area of my expertise at all. So forgive me if I blunder a little bit. I'm sure people will help me out. But essentially, having listened to the debate and the objections on behalf of the Taunton Taxi Association, the committee is concerned about the impact, particularly on taxi drivers in Taunton. It would recommend that the executive looks at the overall impact on taxi driver incomes as part of its deliberations when coming to its decision on this matter at its next meeting. Does that cover it?
I would also request that we have some comparisons for the fact that maybe we do time and a half on a Sunday. Is that consistent across all authorities? What are the differences between authorities in terms of decisions that get made?
Is that, you got those, John? I mean, hopefully you have a little bit of time to address those questions and bring bring some more information to the executive in due course. Does that help?
Yes.
Are there any other questions? Are we all broadly content that we've given this a good going over? Messrs. Colclough, thank you very much for coming along and your contributions. It's much appreciated. And very briefly then.
Tell me who else works on a Sunday at the same rate that they work on a wet Wednesday afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
That answers your question.
Yeah, I think you made the point. The executive will be considering it on the 8th of May. I have no doubt that if you put in a request in, you will speak at that meeting as well. So thank you very much. Okay, right, 5 to 12. Do we want, yes. Do we want a break, or do we want to crack on with the Octagon Theatre, which I think shouldn't take that long. We crack on? Right. Octagon Theatre, Liz Dawson, please.
I've actually got an officer with me, Steve Hughes, who is the programme lead, and he will be much better at taking us through where we are with the Octagon Theatre. So I'm going to hand across to Steve Hughes.
Welcome, Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Will. Whether I'll be better or not is a matter for debate, I'm sure, but we'll see.
We have our paddle boards to put up at the end of the debate.
So the recommendation on the table is that Scrutiny consider the addition of a revised plan for the Octagon Theatre, and that the new plan is added to the council's capital programme. That's what we're bringing forward today. the background, I'm sure, and is in the paper, is that the previous version of the scheme became too expensive. It ended up around the £30 million mark, and that borrowing costs that the council was going to have to undertake were also rising to effectively make the original scheme non-viable. And therefore, the Octagon Theatre was removed from the council's capital programme at that time. Hence the fact that it's coming back today, hopefully to be added back in. We're now working on a somewhat scaled back scheme, which retains the support of the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, excuse me, and the in principle support of Yeovil Town Council, which I'll touch on in a moment. The cost of the scheme now is no more than £15 million. Those costs have been supplied by our pre-construction team in the last iteration, if you like, which was by BAM. And those have been fed into an outline business case, which we've submitted to the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. In basic terms, the new scheme will see a fly tower added to the Octagon Theatre, which will help enormously with programming, attracting West End shows who demand such a fly tower now. The new scheme will also deal with some of the significant accessibility issues that exist in that theatre. Certainly exist because of the background of what the theatre was originally. It'll deal with some of the front of house issues and a remodelling of front of house to help with customer flow as well as food and drink. It'll help with some of the backstage and dressing room issues and some landscaping. So as I said, the overall cost now is predicted to be 15 million. Just to be really clear, DCMS originally awarded £10 million to this scheme, and that £10 million is still available in principle and dependent on a full business case being submitted by this council later in the year. Yeovil Town Council are supportive of the scheme and in principle have put forward £3.75 million towards the scheme. The remainder of the required funds are held by the Octagon Theatre and through external grants. So there is no further capital money requested by Somerset Council. The intention is to devolve the theatre to Yeovil Town Council once this has been completed. And as Chris Hall alluded to earlier, this isn't something we are pushing to Yeovil Town Council. It's something they very much are in favour of and may even be conditional upon the 3.75 million they're putting forward. Adding this scheme to the capital programme means we can now develop it at speed to a point where we could submit a full business case to DCMS later in 2024. That full business case hopefully will trigger the confirmation of the £10 million that has been on the table in principle for some time, enabling us to complete the project, start the project in 2025, completion as quickly as possible, but no later than autumn 2026, depending on construction schedule. I'm the programme manager for Octagon, and that's why I'm presenting today. Liz is the service director, clearly. Well, I think I'll stop at that point. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, that's very clear. Are there any questions? Oh, yes, Liz.
Yeah, so I just want to be really clear that, again, officers have worked really hard, probably over the last sort of 6 months or so, to get this deal on the table. And we've worked in collaboration, I would say, with the department, with DCMS in relation to trying to get the £10 million to stay on the table. So it's been a lot of hard work, and we've got to quite a strong position, I would say, at this point in time. The position of where we currently are as Somerset Council is no different to where the former South Somerset District Council were previously, when they got the £10 million in principle granted towards the capital project. The difference being is that we were not being expected to put in the same level of funding or more to actually match fund. What we have said is that we will provide the resource to deliver the capital project, so the officer resource, and then we will ultimately, once we get to the completion of the project, which should be around about 2026, ultimately we will then devolve it to Yeovil Town Council and they will take on the operation of the theatre.
Okay, thank you. Opening up to councillors Andy Dingwall and then Wes Reed.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry. Was that you first? Thank you. First question is kind of about the order of the process. Is there a particular reason that Somerset Council would take responsibility for the delivery of the project rather than devolving it to Yeovil Town Council first? The subtext of that question is, should the project overspend, which construction projects are liable to do, that feels like at the moment that overspend would land on Somerset Council rather than, and therefore add money to the budget, which at the moment says there's no more Somerset Council funds involved. The second question has fallen out of my head, so I'll try and remember.
See?
So the theatre is currently closed. Council agreed to close it on a continuing temporary basis, and at the time agreed that this council would take it forward as a project to the point of completion when it would be devolved. So that decision was taken a while ago. The risk does sit with this council. It's my job to ensure that risk doesn't materialise, and I'm confident that if we can fully secure that amount of money, which largely depends on the in principle support being brought forward by Yeovil Town Council and the in principle 10 million from DCMS, that we can deliver this reduced scheme within that budget envelope. I'm confident of that, and we're at the point of starting procurement of redesign now, and we will emphasise the fact that there is a fixed budget. Appreciate that risk always exists. I'm also the project manager for Blue Anchor Coastal Defence Scheme. That's been brought in under budget with a saving this year, and I make habit, I'm bound to say, of ensuring that projects I'm involved with as far as humanly possible come in under budget, and I'll do the same with this one if I possibly can.
Thank you. I have remembered my second question.
Please carry on.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Chair. I'm so sorry. It's gone.
All right, I'll let you come back if we're still. Wes Reed, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you clarify exactly where we are with the grant, the £10 million grant? Because talking to our town clerk perhaps about a week ago, I'm not sure it's before or after this paper was published, that she was still waiting a response from DCMS. Now, I'm under the impression now that obviously the business case is paramount and we haven't submitted that business case properly yet. So, can someone explain? Thank you.
So Amanda Card, who's the clerk for Yeovil Town Council, I speak to Amanda on a weekly basis. We meet every Friday in relation to the devolution package for Yeovil Town Council, but also she does sit on the project board for the Octagon Theatre. So I'm of the understanding that Amanda's fully briefed on where we are in relation to the fact that we've presented to DCMS, we've submitted an initial outline business case, and we've been given the suggestion that we we have the sort of in principle funding, but we have to go back with a final business case. And it's at that point that we actually get the confirmation of whether we can take the project forward. So Amanda is absolutely in the full picture in relation to the circumstances of where we are with the project. Unless Steve's got anything further to add, I think both Steve and myself have updated Amanda on a regular basis, but I can take that away as an action to ensure that there is no confusion there.
Okay, yeah, Chris, yeah.
And I just wanted to add something. So this is a phased approach with DCMS. So to suggest that the business case hasn't yet been submitted almost implies that there's something we have not yet done. What we have done is submit the outline business case. DCMS given indications to whether it proceeds to the next stage, and everything that has been required of the council has been submitted on time. We have to wait for their approval at each stage before we can then move on to the next part. So yes, there is a requirement for a final and full business case, and that will be submitted in line with all of the necessary requirements, but we're not behind on anything. Everything requested of us has been provided.
Wes, can you use your mic, please?
Just seemed odd, obviously Amanda mentioned last week, she's still waiting response.
Yeah, you're
Sorry.
not speaking.
Sorry, no, it's just that Amanda mentioned last week she's still waiting responses. This is why I was a bit confused, really.
Okay, sorry, have you covered your point, Wes? Are you happy? Yeah. Andy Kendall, did you have a question? Well, I got confused, mixed my Andy's up.
Yeah, I know that. I do apologise for that, Chair. I only heard Andy. I didn't heard.
Yeah,
What's
well,
it
if you go
Dingwall?
first, and Andy Dingwall has taken the precaution of writing his question down now, so.
Yeah. Confused. Have you remembered yet? Should we let him go? Okay. A lot of it's been answered, but on 2.1, paragraph 2.1, after listening to all this, it says the new scheme will be funded by the DCMS, which is not confirmed, Yeovil Town Council, which is not confirmed, and I don't know what the grant applications are. I'm just a bit curious how that's been worded.
And perhaps not as well as you would have liked, councillor, but should the scheme go ahead, should it go ahead, and as Chris was just commenting, there are various stages we have to go through. So if the scheme goes ahead, and maybe I should have phrased it in this way, should the scheme go ahead, it will be funded by £10 million from DCMS, 3.75 from Yeovil Town Council, and the rest of the funding is in hand. We're not asking the council for any further capital funding. So it's probably about my phrasing, for which I apologise.
Yeah, please.
I'm just concerned about what we're trying to do here when there's no risk register against us at the moment. And as much as I salute you, Steve, your guarantee of it going forward and finishing and all that within the budget that Mr. Dingwall's alluded to, I don't know how we can say we can have total 100% confidence after a lot of the other building that's gone on around the county has gone over budget. They've had millions and they've gone over millions, just keep popping out of nowhere. So I don't know if that makes sense. Oh, it does. Oh, good. Thanks.
I think we all share your concern about cost control on this one. And it's going to be incredibly important. But Liz, I think you wanted to answer that point.
No, if I just come back to say that there is an Octagon project board, so there is a risk register for this project, and it's been very it's been scrutinised in a different way to coming here, but it's been scrutinised throughout in relation to ensuring that if there are risks, if there are issues, that we are dealing with them. So I just wanted to give you that confidence that there is an Octagon project board where we do go through this on a regular basis. Happy to come back as many times as we need to this group to give you confidence in the process. What I would say is, while Steve has alluded to the fact that he delivers and he's obviously very well established in the work that he does, there is risk with any construction project, which is why we're actually here today and we didn't go ahead with the previous project. So there is risk with any construction project in relation to risks that crop up as you go along the project, borrowing costs, building costs. The good news is that we've been actually quite thorough in the process to date, because we have done those intrusive surveys on the building. We probably know more than some of our counterparts that have done similar projects in other parts of the country in relation to kind of theatre projects or construction projects. So we are slightly more informed. So that does give me a little bit more comfort. But we have, whilst you've got Steve here as the sort of program lead today, there is a whole host of officers that sit on that project board and that work with Steve. Some of those come from strategic asset management. We link in with our colleagues that are experts in risk assessments. So I just want to say that while Steve's the lead, we have a whole host of professional officers that are actually really close to the project. We will also be looking at the governance. So once we get to a position of the final business case and we understand the confirmed position, if and when the project gets taken forward, we will be looking at the governance of the project and then how that actually works across the organisation. So my counterpart in strategic asset management, Oliver Woodhams, there will be a higher level of involvement from that director in relation to the delivery of the project with us in culture, to ensure that as much as possible we keep on top of those risks and those issues and deal with them at an appropriate time. But I just want to say again, the whole reason that we're here today is because we stopped a project at one stage because it wasn't viable, and then we had to go around the circle again to get more funding. So that just shows you the level of eyes that have been and knowledge that have been on the project to date, to ensure that we don't get into a position where the council take on a lot of risk, and I would hope that would continue.
Okay, Steve, did you want to
I
add
ask
something?
one more question,
Uh,
Chair?
Well, Steve was going to,
I,
then I'll let you come back.
I just wanted to follow up, and in fact, Liz took it 99% of the way there, really. But the recommendation today is only to add this to the capital build programme. We're not asking you to sign off an amount of money. We're not asking you to rubber stamp the project. Indeed, it will come back through a series of stages as we go through a series of stages. But unless we add this to the capital build programme, we can't actually pursue the project. So what we're asking is for it to be added to the capital build project programme in order that we can work more closely with DCMS, etc., in order that we can continue to bring this project back to relevant committees in order that it can go through the democratic process. I hope that helps a little.
Thank you. Andy, do you have a follow-up?
Maybe I'm asking too much to see a risk register put on top of this, but too early. But it's maybe too early.
Yeah, I think it's been said. I mean, this is going to keep on coming back to us, so I think we can keep an eye on it. So from that point of view. Right, Councillor Dingwall, your time has come.
Thank you for your patience, Chair. So we've heard there's the in principle support from Yeovil Town Council for 3.75 million and the in principle support from the Town Council for devolution of the asset at the end of the process. It feels like, and I'm taking, Steve, I'm taking your previous comment there in mind, this might be discussion for a future committee. It feels like the project is contingent, the affordability of the project is contingent on both those in principle decisions. We won't be in a position in 2026 to run a theatre, as far as I can piece together, as Somerset Council. What legal basis is the in principle decision, or when will that in principle decision be turned into a genuine Yeovil Town Council will take responsibility of the council of the theatre on the completion of the project? Because a lot can change between 2024 and 2026, and is there a risk? How big is the risk that Somerset Council gets stuck with, is the wrong phrase, because obviously it's a great asset, but get stuck with running the theatre at the end of this?
Liz, did you want to?
So I've got the benefit of also being the lead officer for the Yeovil Town Council devolution package. So obviously the two work together quite nicely. So we've been having ongoing discussions around devolution. As I mentioned, I meet with the clerk on a regular basis every Friday to ensure that we're on track with devolution. that does mean that we have to work across directorates. So there is a big pull on resource across directorates. We have got a lot of devolution packages going on at the moment. As we just saw a presentation earlier in relation to Bridgewater, Yeovil is quite a big devolution package. I will need the support from my colleagues around me, which I am getting across the directorates. So there will be a pull on resource from HR. And in respect to the HR side of things, we've started that 2P consultation. So actually, we project that all staff will actually transfer around about the 1st of August. So yes, so you're absolutely right. When you say we won't be in a position to run theatres in 2026, we won't have any staff to run them. So the staff that are associated with Octagon and Westlands will be transferring this year. So we are also working with our counterparts in strategic assets and legal to ensure that we have all of the appropriate paperwork, legal paperwork in place to make sure that this is a safer deal for Yeovil Town Council as it is for Somerset Council, because we've set our budget against it, so it has to happen. But also it has to happen for Yeovil Town Council because they've pledged money, they've increased their precept, and they obviously are committed to taking on the staff as well. So there's a whole host of work that needs to be done. I'm looking over at Steve, but he's not the lead for devolution in my team. That's Dan, who works with me, but there is a meeting happening between legal on our side and Yeovil Town Council side this week to work through the legal paperwork. And that's really key for the Octagon project, but also to ensure that we've just gone through a financial emergency, we've just set our budget. If Yeovil Town Council are pledging this money and coming forward to really work in partnership with us to take this forward and help us, we need to ensure that it's as safe a deal as possible for them, so that if we find ourselves in financial difficulties again and we were in the midst of this deal, that the assets couldn't just be taken away from them. So is as much in our interest as it is for theirs to get this deal done in a right and proper process. But as I said, the service and staff would evolve by around about the 1st of August. From an asset perspective, it is a longer process. There's a lot more that needs to be done, and there's a lot more pull on the resources outside of the cultural directorate to make that happen. And that will be with strategic assets and legal, but we are working through that and we will endeavour to get there. And again, I'm really happy if there's a need for me to come back to this group and provide an update on the devolution for Yeovil. Really happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think regular reports on both of those would be most welcome. Right, well, I've got two councillors in the room, Martin Lovell and Edrich, and then I've got a couple online. So Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've missed it somewhere along the line, but this is a context question. What are the essential differences between the original scheme and this reduced scheme? I don't need a huge amount of detail, but just to get a feel. Thank you.
The major differences are scale. The original scheme suggested adding a balcony to the theatre to increase to 900 and some seats. This scheme doesn't suggest increasing the size of the auditorium, apart from trying to squeeze in some more seats if we possibly can by some realignment. The original scheme expanded the footprint of the theatre significantly to the front, adding studios, etc. So building more. The revised scheme doesn't add to the footprint at all, apart from where the fly tower lands, really. So the biggest differences are in the auditorium not being increased in scale and the footprint of the building not being increased in scale.
Thank you,
Chair. Liz?
Yeah, and I was just going to come in and add that the initial design of the building was like an architectural art, piece of art, really. It was actually really quite impressive. So when we found ourselves in a financial emergency, still is, yeah, but what they'd planned to do with the building, it was going to be a piece of art really in itself. So what we did when we were in the financial emergency was we spoke to BAM. I actually spoke really seriously to them and said, what can we deliver as a bare minimum? You know, we need to be able to deliver certain assets for the Octagon to actually increase the footfall, bring certain shows in, so technical abilities, but actually in relation to the nice to have bits around the edges, we were not in a position to do that, and we still aren't. So even though we've got the £10 million and the in principle 3.75 from Yeovil Town Council, you still couldn't do those extra bits around the edges. So there was a lot in that design work that we've had to scale right back.
Okay, thank you. Edric, please.
Thank you. Can I just ask, what are our maintenance cost implications around an empty building now? And I assume that liability lies with the county until it's transferred. And Stephen said this should go ahead, and we all hope it does. It's a valuable asset to the county. But what would our ongoing maintenance costs are liable to be, or have they been costed for currently an empty building, which is really unheated in, sort of not unloved, but you know what I mean. Have we got a cost implication if this doesn't happen for say 5 or 6 years? What does the bottom line cost to maintain the building when there's no revenue from it, please?
I'd have to take that away and come back to you.
I think Chris is happy to answer.
Thank you. Yeah, so ironically, it costs the council less money to have the building closed than it does for the overall subsidy when the building was open. So it's costing us somewhere in the region of, I think it's around £140,000 a year to have the building closed. The subsidy provided by the council for the Octagon Theatre when open was in the region of about 267, if memory serves me correctly. So it's a bit of a perverse situation, which is cheaper currently.
Yeah, thank you. That's good to know, because that'd be good to tell the public that it's not actually costing us more money in its current state, because I'm well aware of public feeling over the last year what's gone on with it. So that's the sort of thing, maybe when we put comms, it's costing us less rather than it being open currently. So thank you very much for that update.
Okay, thank you. Right, nobody else in the room, so I'll move to councillors online. The first I have is Tony Locke, please.
Yeah, good morning, Will. Yeah, I mean, an interesting subject, this one. I mean, as probably most of you know, I am a Yeovil Town councillor as well as a Somerset councillor. And I think what would the officers, firstly, I'd like to thank the officers on the Somerset and the Town Council for all the work they are doing. It's not something which you can actually micromanage by committee at this moment in time. There are a lot of stages you have to go through. And as we say, Yeovil Town Council, as Liz has said, are supporting this project. Everything is in principle at this moment. There are a lot of boxes to be ticked and a lot of stages to go forward. But you may agree or you may not, Chairman, but I think what would help everybody, this committee and Yeovil Town councillors who are asked questions by many thousands of people in the public arena, if there was a proposed or a timetable put forward by the officers of expected milestones to be completed. Now, I realise things can always go wrong with milestones, you get delays and that, but if there was some sort of a timetable put forward of this date and this reached and that's reached, that would go a long way to answering a lot of the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. That was one of the points.
Sorry, Chairman. Needless to say, I'm very supportive of this programme. What everyone needs to remember is this building was a gift to the people of Yeovil. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. That was one of the points I was going to ask for in my sort of summing up, is to just getting a sense of what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. Thank you very much. Sue Osborne, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just curious to know why the outline business case was not added as an appendix to this report, because I suspect that some of the questions that have been asked may well have been covered had the committee members had sight of the outline business case, which I feel is a piece of information you should have had in order for you to confidently recommend the project is added to the programme. My question would be, when this was first mooted in South Somerset District Council and the grant was applied for from the Arts Council.
I'm sorry, Sue, you're breaking up. Have we lost her? Are you still there, Sue?
Who were looking for.
Sorry, Sue. Sorry, Sue, we've lost you there. You broke up.
Right, I'll see if I can move around. The because the broadband signal here
Okay,
is
we'll give you a
terrible.
moment to.
Am I clearer here?
Yes, you are.
I am clearer here. Good. Okay. When this was first mooted, there was not just the fly tower, the extra 900 seats. There was a cinema, 2 small and a large cinema, stroke sort of small meeting spaces, etc. But we're also told that one of the reasons we didn't necessarily get the larger productions coming forward was lack of seating capacity, hence going up to 900. So my question would be, if you are going to develop or a new business case based on a modest increase on the existing footprint, is there not a risk that you are going to undermine one of the justifications for doing the work in the first place? The original costing was 22 million. So whether you're actually going to, what you're going to deliver for 15, I don't know. I think that's something that needs to be taken into account and how that will affect. The subsidy you refer to of it being open was probably what was the difference between the income and the expenditure, because when it was open, it was actually functioning as a theatre. So I'm not quite sure that saying it's cheaper to keep it shut. I think the people of Yeovil might have something to say about that. But overall, I do have concerns about the deliverability, and that, you know, it's based, I think, as Councillor Kendall said, on a lot of unknowns in terms of where funding is coming from and where it's going to. And I'd also like to know, how much have we spent so far in fees getting to where we are today? Because it seems as though you're going to be recommissioning a new set of architects, project managers, etc., etc. So what have we spent to date so far, and what is the projected cost of actually the project management side of it? Thank you.
Who's going to pick those up? Steve?
Chris is looking at me this time, so it looks like I am. What was spent initially was circa 1.7 million by South Somerset District Council, taking this project to a point that that it was almost fully designed. And I take the points about the additional flexible spaces that were included initially. So that money is spent. What it will cost us to go forward in terms of project management, certainly it'll be managed internally by a program manager. We are going out to procurement as soon as we possibly can to secure the relevant architects and structural engineers, etc. That cost will all be part of the 15 million that I've outlined. So there's no additional cost to this council. That will all be included within the capital figure. Sorry, oh, and you talked about the outline business case. Yeah, the outline business case is available. It's a 65, 70 plus page document that would answer all questions. It talks about the break-even point into the future. It was a very detailed document, which I'm certainly prepared to share with councillors. I simply thought, I guess, that adding this to the capital programme might have been relatively straightforward, because, as I say, we're not asking for any other decisions at this stage, but just to allow us continue to develop the project and bring it back. Sorry, Councillor Osborne, I've probably lost track of some of the nuances of your question, but fundamentally we've spent 1.7 million. All costs in the future will be included within the 15 million, and it'll be partly project managed by ourselves, and any project management we buy in as part of the professional services.
Chris, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to cover. So there's a lot of good points raised there by the councillor. So this is a very different scheme. This is a clearly smaller scheme. We're not trying to do the same scheme for less money. It is by design a completely different scheme. So it's much more refurbishment than redevelopment and expansion. That does have a knock-on impact to the income that that facility can therefore generate. And part of the challenge here is to create not only an affordable capital scheme, but also a revenue affordable scheme. So that it has to be affordable ongoing. Yeovil Town Council have accepted the principle of devolution of the assets based upon the current costs. So the current costs Somerset Council were, when operating, £267,000 per year, and I understand it doesn't sound quite right, but it is costing us less, and we saw that in the budget monitoring report. So there are savings because we are no longer paying £267,000 a year for the Octagon Theatre. So there are savings there that are real. I appreciate that's not the same as the community having the facility accessible. It's purely a financial point. The original scheme, I think it went from 22 million to 29 million to over 30 million. And I don't think I'm breaching too much confidence when we say that the final bids back were actually much closer to 40. So they were growing through a period of considerable inflation. It was a artist designed development scheme rather than a utilitarian style scheme. So all of that has had to be scaled back. In terms of appending outline business cases and risk registers, I don't think we have a problem in doing that. I think we also want to be clear that we're not duplicating the work of the Octagon Redevelopment Board. So the executive put that in place. And we don't want to be duplicating the work that they do. And there are obviously council and wider partner representatives on that board, but we're not withholding anything. If that helps members, clearly we can make that available.
Back on that, this is a scrutiny committee. Scrutiny is there to just that scrutinise, and it does have a reasonable expectation that all information will be put in front of it. 60-page appendix, so what? If you sit on the audit committee, you'll get up to 1,000 pages. So I wouldn't let that put you off. But I do feel concerned that a very important document, like an outline business case, was not submitted as an appendix to this report for scrutiny to do its job and scrutinise and question accordingly. That is a disappointment. In terms of the other points you've raised, historically, one of the things that the Octagon provided was a ticket levy. That ticket levy was then used to support the internal loan that was done for South Somerset to refurbish and take on Westlands. That money obviously isn't going in. You've indicated that you're not paying a subsidy there, but Westlands has taken up some of the Octagon work, probably at the cost of its own programmes. So how is that impacting on Westlands? Because that is going to show up there.
Chris, you want to take that?
Yeah, I just want to be clear, we're not trying to withhold the business case. If members want to see it, we will do. Just to be clear, it's not a business case to this council, it's the business case to DCMS, but we can make it available, it's not a problem. In terms of the ticket levy, yes, Octagon had a ticket levy in place for a number of years. Clearly, they are not operating and are not receiving, therefore, that income. The subsidy that I refer to, the 267, is the cost that the council stands in its budget after the ticket levy, after all income, after all expenditure. That was the balancing figure that the Historical Council and Somerset Council would have stood had the building been in operation. Westlands also has a ticket levy, and again we see in the finance reports from today that the position for Westlands is improving, partly because shows have been moved to Westlands because Octagon isn't available, and there is a ticket levy there that's being applied, and they are now supporting the repayment of that loan. So it all comes out in the wash of the two facilities. There is crossover, both in terms of staffing and management and support services. But as it stands, both of those facilities are costing the council less because of some growth at Westlands and the reduced operating costs at the Octagon.
Yeah, I was just flagging that up because in a previous paper, perhaps presented to another committee or even a budget paper, there was something about making the Westland business more sustainable. And I think that was in one of the budget papers coming forward, that there was a sort of question mark there. And I also understand that Westlands may well be part of the devolution package to Yeovil Town Council. Am I correct in that?
I think that's correct. Liz Lashon wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that, again, in the budget setting papers on this occasion, Appendix 10, the ticket levy income is clearly shown on line 59. So it is very much there. And I remember speaking to the 151 officer to ensure that it remained there. Thank you.
So presumably,
thank
Liz,
you.
you'll be going on Mastermind next year with your specialist subject, the budget papers.
Yeah, if you cut me in half, Chair, you'd find it written all through me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that okay with you, Sue? Are you any other points you wish to raise?
No, I think that's fine to be going on with, and I do feel I would agree, Chair, that this is an item, because it is a major one in many ways, that it does come back to this committee or any other relevant committee on a regular basis, complete with the full set of papers.
Thank you. Yes, it will be coming back at some point, appropriate. Okay, are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Andy Candle, yes.
If it's relevant, please answer. If not, just somebody shut up. The £140,000 whilst it's closed that we're paying, what is that £140,000 paying for, please?
I'll have to go back and check, but it'll be things like standing utilities, because we haven't capped off utilities. There'll be insurances, there'll be some of the heating and ventilation systems are still operating on tick over to prevent deterioration of the building. There will be some associated management and internal recharge costs. If a break, I don't think we put security in place from recollection, we've just locked the building. We could probably get a more detailed breakdown if it's important.
Actually interested.
I think, yeah, getting a breakdown of the current costs, I think it is important if we can do that. Right. In the absence of anybody else wishing to speak, I'll try and sort of sum up, but I've got one or two points I want to make before we get there. I think from a scrutiny point of view, we need to be absolutely convinced that the only driver is not the 10 million. Are we sure we're doing this only because the government is prepared to offer us the money? And you know, the question therefore falls, well, if we didn't have that money, would we attempt to borrow it? And I know that's a sort of open question, but I think we do need to be absolutely certain this is something we really want to do, and we're not being sort of not so much coerced, but also sort of prompted into doing it because there's a large government grant available. So from that point of view, I think we need to say is we are where we are. The money is ostensibly available, and we have a way of utilising it. We've heard today that the capital costs associated with this refurbishment will not fall on this council. They will be covered by Yeovil Town Council, monies raised elsewhere, and also the 10 million. That doesn't quite meet it, because we've just heard that there are ongoing costs of maintaining the building as it is of 140, and also there's Steve and his team and others in terms of design and managing the project through to completion, because they're not covered by the 15 million. They're costs that will all fall to this council, and I haven't really got a sense of how much that's likely to be. I think it's also been mentioned about what we're going to end up with. We're going to end up with a theatre that is the same size as the one we have at the moment, which currently requires a 260,000 or 267,000 pounds subsidy. So we also need to be assured that on the other side it's going to wash its face, and certainly as far as Yeovil Town Council is concerned, doesn't require a six-figure subsidy. So I think that's another point we need to bear in mind. I'm now going to ask a very sort of naive question directly to Steve, because it occurs to, I don't know anything about the theatres, and I don't know anything about fly towers, but in the preliminary meeting to discuss the agenda, I did ask him what a fly tower was. Now, apparently it's a tower where you can haul scenery up into the sky, and drop it down. You've got safety curtains and things like that, which presumably means it's a relatively tall structure. Now, I don't know the Octagon. I've never been there. I don't know how tall it is, but I would be interested to know that structurally, is it possible to add a 2 or 3 story tower to the building without compromising its foundations or anything? Is that, I mean, that works. I hope it's been done, but it's a question I felt I have to ask, because it seems to me, since we're moving away from the major redesign, it is the one element that is remaining. So I want to make sure we can actually build it without running into excess costs. For example, I see Wes has just been waving at me, so I'll come back to you in a moment if I may. And I suppose finally that what we're trying to do is we're trying to move a whole load of things along here all at the same time. So there's the refurbishment of the theatre, which is a construction project. Alongside that, there is Yeovil Town Council and sorting out the devolution arrangements. We have to be 100% certain that Yeovil Town Council will come along at the end of it and pick this up. And I'm sure they are at the moment. But as we move into a more detailed business case, back to the sort of capacity and the income generating potential of this facility, I wonder what the implications are if it suddenly doesn't start to stack up. There's a whole lot there, which I'm not necessarily wanting an answer to today, but I think there are legitimate questions for a scrutiny committee to ask. Now, Wes, you were waving at me, presumably about the fly tower, were you?
I don't know too much about fly towers. The way I understand fly towers is that it's a solid screen, or as a curtain in effect, that can rise in its rigid form to the height of the stage into the roof. So obviously that roof needs to be raised to at least the opening that the audience see in terms of height. And it's the in thing, I suppose, for every theatre to have nowadays, if that's not the theatre. It makes the changes so much quicker. Currently at the moment, the Octagon has curtains that are pulled either manually on wires, left, right, stage left, stage right, or they're on motors that are driven vertically. And it's a very slow process in comparison.
I don't doubt the need for it, but I mean, in construction terms, what you're looking at is doubling the height of the roof above the stage, plus probably 50% to give you a bit of headroom. And it's whether the building can take an extra construction like that was the naive question I was asking. But Steve is itching to answer.
Well, I'm not itching to answer. I'm not a structural engineer, but you can be assured we'll be employing one. I think the slightly glib answer is I don't think the current building will stand a fly tower being built on top of it, which is why we'll, in all probability, put new foundations in, build a new steel frame, which will take a brand new fly tower, so it won't sit. Don't forget, this has already been designed once. It's already been, it has planning permission once. It's been through the process. So can a fly tower be built on site? Yes, it can, is the easy answer, because we've already got the design that shows it can be done. I can't remember the exact detail, but I strongly suspect it will be a brand new set of foundations and a brand new fly tower, which will be then tied in to the existing building, is the short answer. But we will have structural engineers to make sure it can be done and will be done safely, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, so that leads on to my next point. As soon as you get structural engineers involved, that's when I start to get a little bit wobbly about cost. But clearly, that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. But thank you very much for that. Okay. Oh, Chris, yes.
I wonder if I can just come back on a couple of the points you made. So would the council do this if it wasn't for £10 million? We probably wouldn't have closed the Octagon Theatre at that point in time. Therefore, we would continue to have an ageing facility that requires significant capital investment as well as revenue investment. So I don't know that we'd be pushing forward at this speed should we not be receiving external income. So if the DCMS money falls away and the town council money falls away, we'll be back at a capital scheme that's dependent upon borrowing. I would also point out, though, that there are wider benefits here in terms of tourism and income for Yeovil and Somerset as a whole. It protects jobs for those people directly and supply chain involved. you've picked up on the Fly Tower already, but that will allow us to bring more West End style shows. They rely upon Fly Towers for their scenery rather than exit stage left or right. So there are some really important factors in amongst here that go just beyond the money. The other thing, of course, is if we were doing nothing at this stage, we would be left with a building that's closed and some difficult choices around what we might do with that asset. And there isn't an obvious other use for it. So there would be other costs that the council would have to bear and certainly consider. So I think overall, if this can be approved by DCMS and the Yeovil Town Council, we have the ability to upgrade something for the benefit of the community. And I think it would be a very successful project given its difficult financial history. I would see this as a success, but we're a little way off being able to judge it. I appreciate.
Probably if I could just add one last thing, because I was going to mention it earlier, but Chris basically just summed it up. Was that when we went to government to ask for the £10 million, the £10 million is for a cultural arts hub for Somerset in Yeovil. So it's, whilst it's a building and it's a theatre, probably when we bring back the cultural strategy in June, you'll understand the wider concept of what we're trying to achieve from the Cultural Directorate. We have an NPO in the south, which is very much tied in with the Octagon and Westlands. We've also put in for a bid for a music hub for Dorset and Somerset, which we would be lead. So there's a lot of other things going on which set why we're trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve with the Octagon in the wider context of where we're trying to get to with outcomes. So I think Chris mentioned it briefly there, but when I come back with the cultural strategy, it'll probably become clearer as well what we're trying to achieve.
That's fine. Final question. Do we have any indication of when we're going to get the green light from DCMS? Or, I mean, I think it's been said that they are supportive, so I think we can work on that. But have we any idea when they're going to come up with a red?
Yes, there's a critical path, so we can share that with you. The what DCMS want to know is what the cost is. The cost can only be achieved once we get this onto the capital build programme. Then we can go to procurement to find an architect to look at the original scheme and to develop that scheme into what we wish it to be. I would expect to go to DCMS in September. With a full business case which needs to be written up, which is a continuation or a development of the outline business case that was submitted in January. I'm afraid I can't tell you how long the DCMS will take to make a decision once it's submitted. That's in their hands, but I can't emphasize enough that we have a really positive ongoing relationship with DCMS. We have another meeting at 3 o'clock this afternoon with them. We have that meeting regularly. They are as supportive as they can be, but they will not state or allow to be stated that £10 million is secure until the outline till the full business case is submitted with costs, and then they will go through their processes. So the best I can do is late autumn.
Yeah, I mean, it was ever thus. I mean, the problem with September, of course, was we may be in a pre-election period, which will muddy the water. I mean, all I can do is commend the work you've done and just crack on, really. And,
thank you.
And we'll look forward to seeing you again, probably at our August meeting. I think it would be useful to get a catch up as to how far we've got. We should be well advanced by then. So if we can do that, that would be very helpful. In the absence of any other comments, again, thank you very much for some really interesting answers, a really interesting debate. My instructions tell me that we're meeting again on the 13th of June here. So thank you all very much for your attendance, and look forward to seeing you then, and therefore close the meeting. Thank you. Oh, and to those online as well. Thank you for your contributions.
Yeah, good day.